communicate vocal about different things.
Okay. One of the questions I'd love to hear some feedback on. What is your biggest concern or worry when it comes to leadership?
Doing mistakes.
Okay, making a mistake. Can anyone relate to Richie with that concern? Making a mistake? Failing, okay.
Passing wrong information.
Sorry?
Passing wrong information.
Okay, passing on wrong information.
Starting conflict or when there is difficulty in relationship.
Okay, having to deal with conflict, having to help people work conflict out. Yeah.
Making crucial decisions.
Okay. Feeling the pressure to make a crucial decision. Yeah. All of those fears and concerns that y'all shared, I can relate to all of them. I think they are normal part of leadership. We obviously don't want to be led by fear, but I think part of leadership is there is a weight that comes to it, and some of that weight are the things that you guys have just described. And that is, to a degree, that's normal and natural. Again, you don't want to be led by those, or you don't want to be hindered by those. But the weight of responsibility with leadership is real. And the weight of caring for people enough that you want to make sure that you don't make a mistake or that you pass on good information, all of those things, that is, those fears or concerns are normal, and I would not let those keep you from stepping into leadership, from being a person of influence, but just to acknowledge that that is a part of it, and to be able to embrace that challenge, be able to meet that fear kind of head on and say, okay, this is going to be a part of this experience, but I'm going to step into it anyway. And yes. Would anyone like to share an example of a leader that has impacted your life? People impact us all the time for positive and negative. So it can be a negative story, it could be a positive story, but does anyone have an example or a story of someone that's impacted their life?
I have one, I think. I hope I can share it in a good way. I once had a manager that I had really high expectation because he came across as a very, how do we say, a good, like a coach, like a accessible, good person. And then in the end, some things happened, and I was so disappointed in him because I had this expectation that he would be there to support me, to continue coaching me because I had some issues in the job at the time. And I felt that I did everything on my side to work on those issues, and he just really, really let me down. So it was very disappointing and a hard experience. And it took me a long time to get over that and to come to the point that I say, okay, I forgive this manager, this person. And that was a long process. But I think I also learned a lot. I learned about myself, like even that managers are also human.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll try this. Okay.
Anyone else have a short story of a leader that has impacted your life that you wanted to share? Hello?
I can share.
Okay.
It's not very short, but I will try to make it short.
Yeah.
It's my mentor, Bertini. She's the one who encouraged me to do this degree in education.
Mm-hmm.
I think without her, I would not be even here.
Wow.
Yes, because I really struggle with academics.
Mm-hmm.
You may not believe, but I failed in university, and I really to win an exam or a test is traumatizing me.
Mm.
So the University of the Nation is like a way of redemption. Like God redeemed one of my hurt in education.
Uh-huh.
My sister is the one who
What is her name?
Claudia.
Okay.
She's the one who worked alongside me. She never give up. When I want to give up, she's the one who pushes me.
Wow.
And when I struggle with the academics,
Mm-hmm.
she gave me a lot of grace. And then really come to me and ask how she can help me and what can we do together when I'm really stuck. And because of her, now I can do it much better,
Mm-hmm.
even by myself.
Yeah.
Even though I'm still very slow, but I see that I overcome a lot of like things that I could not do before.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can do it. And now I'm here.
Wow.
So it's because of her support.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's a great story. Claudia seems like an amazing lady. That's really cool. It's great to have your own personal encourager and cheerleader and supporter. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So there is much that we could say and talk about regarding leaders and leadership. I have 2 mornings to do that. There are endless amounts of things. So I am just gonna like touch a tiny bit on what I know and some of my experiences. So I hope it adds on to what you already have, but this will certainly not be an all-encompassing teaching. I went on Amazon Books and I did a search for leadership books on Amazon just to see how many results would come up in the search. 70,000. So you go on Amazon, you want to look for a book about leaders or leadership, and you have over 70,000 results. Now, some of them might be repeated a couple times, but there is a ton there. There are books everywhere. I think someone referred to this book on Monday, Leaders Eat Last. This is an author that some SBCW staff are familiar with. I'm not familiar with him, but this was like one of the top books in my search. Of course, Marcus is a big fan of John Maxwell, so he says a ton about leadership. There's a book about leadership I found called The AI-Driven Leader, Harnessing AI to Make Faster, Smarter Decisions. There's even books on Donald Trump's leadership, a lot of books on those. Here is one called A Psychoanalytic and Historical Perspectives on the Leadership of Donald Trump. And Changing Their Minds is another book about Donald Trump and presidential leadership. So I make these examples of books to just say there is so much out there about leaders and about leadership. And these are just like written books. What about podcasts? What about university seminars? What about the YWAM's U of N have 4 or 5 different leadership schools. So you can go somewhere for 3 months, just like you're here for the SBCW. You can go somewhere
for 3 months and do a leadership training school. So there is just so much out there about leaders and about leadership. And what I want to make the point in all of that is to just say our understanding of leaders, what it means to be a leader, our understanding of leadership has to come from the Bible. There are a tremendous amount of resources out there, and some of them are good, and some of them maybe not good. But as people committed to a biblical worldview, our understanding of leadership has to come from the Bible, from God's word. We can take these other tools that will help us unpack those biblical principles or help explain those biblical principles of leadership and what it means to be a leader, but we have to get our understanding from Scripture. So we're going to look at some scriptures throughout the couple days. There's a lot of good tools out there, and those can help us apply biblical leadership, but we need to be sure that they're helping us apply biblical leadership and not another type of leadership. A few quotes about leaders and leadership. These are just random quotes that I've pulled up. One person says, leadership is not about charge. It's not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. Another person says the size of your leadership is not determined by the size of your office or title, but by the strength of your character. And here's an interesting quote I found that actually, I remember part of it from a commercial when I was, a commercial that was on TV when I was growing up. But this leader said, we herd sheep, we drive cattle, we lead people. Lead me, follow me, or get out of the way. Interesting perspective on leadership. So who were these people? The first quote was a quote given by Bono. He is, if you don't know, he's a singer in the band called U2, and he has used his fame to fight poverty and disease, especially in Africa. He has influenced world leaders to cancel debt for poor countries and to help fund life-saving medicines. His work has literally helped millions of people get better access to healthcare and education. And then we have a young lady here. She's not so young anymore, but she says the size of your leadership is not determined by the size of your office or your title, but by the strength of your character. Does anyone know who Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is? Have you ever heard her name before? You have? Yeah. Yes, very good. She's the first female president of Liberia, and she was the first female elected head of state in all of Africa. She helped rebuild that nation after years of civil war. She promoted women's rights, and she won the Nobel Peace Prize for a lot of her work. And so she is a person who is recognized as having leadership and influence. And her point is, it doesn't matter how big your office is or how nice your chair is behind your desk, but what matters with leadership is the strength of your character. And then this quote about leadership, lead me, follow me, or get out of the way. That was given by General George Patton. He was a United States general during the Second World War, and he was known for his bold and aggressive leadership. He played a key role in defeating Nazi Germany by leading fast-moving tank attacks throughout Europe. So when the Allied forces landed in France for the start of D-Day, and then pushed forward towards Berlin to defeat the German military, he was very aggressive in his leadership and pushed people forward. And he was the type of leader that was needed at that moment. And so his comment on leadership seems really strong. lead me, follow me, or get out of the way. Sometimes there's a time and a place for that type of directive, aggressive leadership. So just 3 quotes from people who have had influence as leaders. But we want to, I said, we want to look at a biblical definition, some biblical definitions for leadership, and let that be our building blocks. So I'll share those real briefly, and then we'll take a 5 or 10 minute stretch break. Sound good? So a leader is a servant who guides others with wisdom, humility, and integrity. In biblical leadership, character matters. It is a very important component. In fact, I hear many people say, I would rather have a leader who has good character and less giftings and skills than a leader and personality than a leader who has a strong leadership gifting or skill or personality but lacks character. So a leader is someone who's going to guide others with wisdom, going to do that in humility, and going to have integrity. Mark 10:42 through 45, you may recall the story. I can just open it up really quick. Mark 10:42 to 45. So Jesus' disciples, James and John, have a request for Jesus. And they say, we would like to, when you get into your kingdom, we would like to sit on your right and left. And Jesus kind of responds to them, but what he says to them in essence is that the rulers in this world lord it over those they lead. So they control those they lead. And the officials flaunt their authority. So worldly leaders flaunt their authority, those with a worldly mindset. But among you, it should be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. And we'll talk tomorrow a bit about servant leadership. Servant leadership is an important part of what it means to be a biblical leader. And it's not just for the pastors and the missionaries to be the servant leader. It's also for the government officials or the university professors or the businessmen and women to be servants in their leadership. And leadership involves the act of influencing and guiding others according to God's will. So Matthew 20:25 to 28 is the similar story that Matthew tells, as we looked at in Mark. But leadership is about influencing people. Matthew 20:25 through 28. Yep. It is about influencing and about guiding. It's prioritizing service over power. And many views of leadership, whether it be from a secular view of leadership or even an animistic view of leadership, a lot of it, the root of it is it's about power and control. And biblical leadership is more about service and serving through love. So we're going to unpack that a bit. So leadership is not about titles, but it's about impacting lives. That's an important thing. Sometimes there are titles or positions that a leader has, and sometimes not. But more than a position or a title, leadership is about impacting lives. And I said it at the start, leadership is about people. It's about bringing influence into people's lives. And so sometimes you may be in a situation where you have a title or a position. I happen to have that right now. They call me the base leader here. Marcus jokingly for a long time would call me the president or the boss. So I have that title, but that's not what makes my leadership good or bad. What makes my leadership good or bad, or whether I do a good job at leading, is how I influence people. Do I influence people in a good way or not? And that's the true question to look at, not whether you have a title or a position, but whether you bring influence. And if you're not aware, and I assume that all of us are aware because we've probably read the Bible a little bit, every follower of Jesus is called to influence. Jesus tells us many places, but in Matthew 5, he tells us, you are the light of the world. So if you take this picture of a candle going into a dark room, when that candle goes into a dark room, it influences that room. The world, that room is a little less dark because of that candle. And Jesus, a couple places after that, says, you're the salt of the earth. Now, we're all probably familiar with what salt does to a meal, but what does putting salt on a plate of food do to it? It enhances the flavor. Yeah. What about hot sauce? Do people like hot sauce? Spicy food? What happens when you put like we cook at the base here and someone makes some rice and you grab some hot sauce and put some of that on the rice? What does it do to the rice? Makes it sharp. Yeah. Yeah. It actually changes it. Before you just had plain rice, it's okay. White rice is just okay as it is. But when you put some seasoning on it, some chili on it, it actually changes. It changes the flavor. Sometimes, depending how much you put on, it changes the color of the rice, at least the grains of it here and there. And so leadership is really, it is about bringing change in people's lives, helping to bring change in people's lives. And it is about influence. And all of us, as followers of Jesus, that's what we're called to do. So how many, maybe I should have asked this a couple minutes ago, but that's okay. How many actually see themselves as a leader? A little bit kind of shy to do that, maybe not at all. This is a reality that I would love for you guys to take with you as you finish up your SBCW and as you move on here. Not only are you called to leadership and to be leaders, but you are. By being a follower of Jesus, you are a leader. Whether you realize it or not, whether you are activating that leadership in you or not. Everyone within the body of Christ is a leader, whether they realize it or not. So if I could deposit that into your heart, in the very depths of your being, into your mind, so that you would bring change in your thinking, that's what I would want to give you. That you could wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, I'm a leader in the kingdom of God. This is who I am. This is not just something I'm supposed to do, but because of Christ's death and resurrection, this is who I am. And now I'm going to live accordingly. So all of us are leaders. The titles and the positions that might come as you walk with the Lord and you start your own business or you become the principal of a school or you become president of your country. Those titles, those positions that come, work within those and be responsible within that, but you don't need that to make you a leader. Christ's death and resurrection and your desire to, by faith, trust him for that makes you a leader. That's what he's called you to. That's what he's anointed you to. And now we have to live in that and step out in that. And I know that sounds like a sermon, and sermons are usually for the church sphere of society. But I tell you, these truths apply into the other spheres of society as well. We are called as salt and light into those areas, and we are leaders just by being there. Of course, you need to be intentional and directive and different things, and we'll look at some of that when we're going to talk a bit about shepherding as leaders. That's going to look different if you shepherd a church or if you have a calling to shepherd the nation as its government leader. How that will be lived out might look different. But leadership is about influence. All right. Any questions? Any comments? Anything that you would like clarified? How do I see the West leadership currently? Okay, I can only speak of my country. So I don't want to comment on, I would have opinions about Europe and the West, but I'll comment on my country. A couple things. I think one, this idea of America first, make America great again. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. That's what the current president campaigned on. I can see where that can become an extreme, and it could lead to unhealthy things. But I also see it as a part of a shepherding leadership. The role of a shepherd is to protect his sheep. And so in the case of someone like Donald Trump, part of his role as leader of the United States is to protect America and its interests. And so you put them first because you're protecting them. Again, it can be distorted and it can be taken to an extreme to where you isolate yourself or where it becomes nationalism and leads to all of these unhealthy things. But it's about protection, and part of the role of a government leader at that level of leadership is to protect his nation and protect his people. So that's one thing. The other thing I'll say about my country and not just the leadership today, but I would say leaders in the last 25 or 30 years who have been leaders in America, presidents and others, I think there has been a real deficit of biblical character. And I think that is very unfortunate. And I think that is a key part of leadership. And so I would particularly would enjoy more Christian character in our leaders. You know, all of us know, I mean, I shouldn't speak for you, but I'll speak for me. So I'm a Christian. I love the Lord. I have a ton of room to grow in my character. And so you can be a Christian and still not have Christian character, still be needing to grow in that. And I think our last our last three presidents, in my opinion, have lacked Christian character. And so that's unfortunate because you have people in leadership trying to do their job that leaders are called to, but they lack character. And just one final thought about my nation and our leadership. I would not want to be president of my country at all. I would not. I'm looking forward to ending my 5 years of leadership here, in part because there is a weight that comes with leadership that I shared earlier that's just normal and natural. And I've come to the time where I've carried that and now I'm ready to lay it down. But the weight of being a president of the United States, I would not want to carry at all. And probably most government leaders of nations, I think there's a tremendous amount of weight that they carry, and I pray for them. Sometimes I do criticize them. I should probably not do that as much. But there's a real weight that comes to that type of leadership, whether you're leading the United States or India or Kenya or Madagascar or Canada or the Netherlands. That's a level of leadership that comes with tremendous weight and responsibility. And I think that's why Paul tells us we should pray for these ladies and these guys who do that, because yeah. So yeah, hope that gives you a little snippet on what I think of Western leaders. And again, I would have opinions on Europe, but even though I carry a Swiss passport, I tend to want to just focus on. I feel like with speaking about America, I have a little more understanding, and so can speak into it that way. Any other questions or comment? Yes.
How do you form a team?
How do you form a team? That's a good question. I think one way to form a team, particularly if you're gonna do team leadership, I think a couple things. One, finding people who you are either friends with or are willing to become friends with, because friends believe the best in one another. Friends are allowed to be honest with one. A good friend will be honest with you. He'll tell you when you're doing well, and he'll tell you where maybe you missed something there. So look for people who are either your friends or who you're willing to build a friendship with, that deep level relationship with. That's one thing. How to build a team. Another thing I think would be invite people on your team. Like, let's assume, Joshua, you're the leader and you're going to build a leadership team to work with you. Put people on that team who have the courage to say no to you. The last thing you want, I think, on a leadership team, the last thing I think the Bible wants on a leadership team is a bunch of people who all just are people who will say yes to you and agree that everything you want to do. You want people on your team who will be supportive of you, who will work with you, but someone who can tell you no is really valuable. Someone who can say, hey, you know what, Joshua, that's a really good idea, but you really are missing this side of the story. And so I think you need to reconsider your decision. That is a good teammate to have. So yeah, two things come to mind: friends, or a willingness to have deep friendship with those on your team, where honesty can be spoken, where encouragement can be given, and then this second thing, this willingness to put people on your team who have the strength to challenge you in a good way, or say no to you, or bring a different perspective. It's easy as a leader building a team. It's easy to just want to put people on your team who are going to agree with everything you say.
All right.
And that's the easy way, but I
Right
don't
now.
know that the fruit of that is good. And it's one of the things, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet him yet, but Ronald was on our leadership team here at the base for 2.5 or 3 years. 3 years, yeah. And one of the things I appreciate about Ronald, and I've told him this, there's a lot of things I appreciate about him, but one of the things I appreciate about him is I always knew where I stood with him, and I always knew what he thought about a decision we were making, an issue we were looking at, or about how I handled something. He was very open and willing to share and give that feedback, and I really grew to appreciate it, because I think a good leader wants people to be honest with him or her. A good leader wants people who can be a mirror for them, because sometimes as a leader, I have a subjective view on myself or on my decisions. And if I have someone I can trust who says, well, you're seeing yourself as in blue jeans and a brown shirt today. Actually, that decision you made,
Right.
you have shorts and a t-shirt on. You're not seeing yourself right. And it's one of the things I really appreciate about Ronald. And he was always supportive and encouraging, but I always knew where I stood with him, and I always knew that he would be honest with me. And so that's having people on your team like that who can encourage and support your vision, but who aren't afraid to speak up is a good thing. The temptation is to just build a team of people who will shake their head, yeah. So the leader says, I would like to do this, and everyone says, yeah, that's good, without any dialogue or conversation. So that's the harder way, but I think it's the healthier, more biblical way. Good question. Any other questions? First of all, I don't mind questions and dialogue. I have a bunch of notes here, but I would much rather, as people have
Now we're going back. We're not enter traffic.
we'll have time
We'll not come out here.
meeting. Yes, George?
Is it always encouraging for a leader to excuse, like, for example, you inherited a system or you inherited leadership position,
Mhm.
the previous administration or the previous leadership,
Yeah.
do the way maybe you see should have been done well,
Uh-huh.
and in most of the time you keep going back to that in most of your speech. It was this guy, it was these people.
Yeah.
But is it a strategy to manage the people that you can do it?
Yeah.
Is it just that he's a weak leader and he doesn't have options to fix things?
Yeah. So if I step into leadership, I try to build on what has come before me and leaders who have come before me. And some things, it's not a matter maybe of right or wrong. It's just a matter of a different approach or a different way. So there should be freedom to go a different way. What I try to do, and I'm not always perfect at it, but what I try to do is I try to take responsibility for if it comes up in a conversation for the failures of a previous leadership when I am leading. So for example, if someone comes with a critique of something that's being done or that was done, rather than saying, well, that was that leader's, they did that, I'm not responsible for that. I try as best I can to not, in English we say, throw the former leaders under the bus. I try to, hey, I'm in leadership now, and so I'm really sorry, and I apologize for what has been done. I try to take some ownership in that. Yeah. I think there's like the more I've been leading in this role in particular, the more I realize how hard leadership is. And so I would want for the next leaders who come after me to not always say, oh, well, that's David. David did that wrong, or David did that poorly. Because then they would be throwing me on the bus, under the bus. So I try to give that to the previous people. I try to lead in relationship with previous leaders. I try to lead in a way that I would want someone to treat me. You know, it's the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. So, yeah, sometimes when new leaders come, they have to continue some of what has been in the past decided, and you want to do that in a way that honors that, and you may not like it. I've had situations where previous leaders have made decisions that and made commitments to people that I, as a leader, am saying, okay, because that was committed to you in the past, I'm going to continue to allow that, let's say. But personally, I don't necessarily agree with that decision, but because they were given that permission from a leader, I'm not going to come in and change that. So I try to be supportive in that way. And sometimes as a leader, you have to do things that maybe you don't fully agree with. And I don't mean a positional leader. I just mean a leader, someone of influence. All of us are in that place as leaders. Sometimes the choice is, am I going to do something that I prefer not to do just because I'm being asked to do it by someone else? I may not like it. It may not be my most favorite thing, but I'm going to submit and walk in obedience, even if I don't like it. We have that choice to make as leaders, as people following Jesus. We have that choice all the time. Am I going to do what I maybe don't particularly want to do, or am I going to run off and do my own thing in that particular situation? And I think if it would come to things where it would be clear in Scripture that if I did that, it would be breaking a command or law from Scripture. You know, if a leader would come and tell me, or if someone would come and tell me you should kill so and so, that's very clear. I don't. In that case, I don't follow that person. I follow Scripture. But a lot of these choices we have are all about personal preferences. Someone will tell us something that we particularly don't want to do or don't like to do because it's a matter of preference. But and we'll talk about this some tomorrow, part of being a good leader, where you can get training in being a good leader, is by being a good follower. And we'll talk about that a bit tomorrow. But yeah, so those are some thoughts. Yes.
So, I have this question. I was the only guy with women.
Okay.
And then there were like every week, everybody were given slots to lead the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a situation where the entire team split into half, almost half. And then like I'm being as a leader that day.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody have their own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried my best to discern all those opinion from the scripture level.
Yeah.
And so and then the team was again divided into like 70 and 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And so like since 70% were in one agreement,
Mm-hmm.
I consider that is the best choice to go further with.
Right.
And then in the feedback, they all these women, they became one team,
Mm-hmm.
and then they said you didn't hear our opinion and
Yeah.
all. And then I was little shocked, and I was like, did I assume, or did I actually did it, or
Mm-hmm.
did they misunderstand me
Yeah.
and all? And this really raised me a, a question, like how to uh, deal with wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
that there are bunch of opinions ahead of you,
Yeah.
and it's like bringing the team on one point.
Yeah.
That's the biggest task,
Yeah.
being a leader. So how to deal with the wisdom?
Yeah. That's a great question. What did you, just real quick before I answer it, was there something you learned in that whole process?
Yes, what I learned is like it's good that sometimes being logical, but it is also you need to give space for emotions,
Mm-hmm.
because uh, emotions not necessarily are bad things,
Yeah.
but then I should find the balancing point
Mm-hmm.
between, even though I I heard them, uh, applying them practically, I
Yeah.
should stick with end of the day with one thing
Yeah.
that majority people agrees on,
Yeah.
from the scripture basis.
Yeah.
But then, like, since I still value the 30% as well,
Mm-hmm.
when they not even 30%, the whole group became one, and
Yeah.
they said you didn't hear us,
Yeah.
and then I was like little shocked,
Yeah.
overwhelmed. So
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. How to apply leadership in a group situation or a group setting like that. I think some of what you did sounds really good. So you're listening to people. You're not just gathering everyone together and commanding them and telling them what to do, but you're listening to people. You're gathering feedback, which is good. Um, it sounds like both of the issues weren't like both of the perspectives weren't going against scripture. Both may have had good things in there. And so what I try to do is I try to listen to as many voices as possible. And I try to get what is the consensus of the group. One of the things with leading, whatever level of leadership you are in, it's rare where you can get everyone to agree 100%. Those are really good moments of gold, but it's really rare that happens. So you want to try to get a consensus. What is the overall atmosphere or sense of this decision? And it sounded like you had a sense that 70%, that's more than 2/3 of the people. That's almost 3/4 of the people had this perspective. And in you, that sounded like a wise decision. So you make that decision. I think that's a good way. You gather the consensus, you make the decision. A couple things to be aware of. One of the things that you could do in a situation like that, once you make a decision, is you could, while that decision is being lived out, you could really be intentional to work towards that 30% and continue to build relationship with them and continue to bring good influence in them and continue to try to win them to this decision, recognizing that they weren't in favor of it. They had another perspective, but they're valuable people as well. And so you want to, as that group is going forward, you want to connect with those people. So that's one thing. I think something else to be aware of, you will never please everyone. And if you try pleasing everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one. So at some point, we need to make decisions in a situation like Richie described. We could talk about it all day and all night and the next day, but at some point, things need to move forward. So you make a decision, and then in confident humility, move the group forward. Once it, I want to say this carefully. I always want to be open to learn and change and grow. But once a decision is made, I try not to look back and second guess myself. I trust the process I've made the decision in. If that process has been good, then I try to, in a humble way, move forward. I do that very practically in so many things. When we buy airline tickets as a family to travel, I'm the one that does that in the family. So I spend a couple weeks looking what are the best airports to fly in and out of, what are the best days to fly within all that. But once I click that purchase, I don't spend more time going back tomorrow seeing, oh, the tickets are $100 cheaper than they were when I purchased that. You know, once I make a decision, I move forward. And so I think in a situation like you described, or different situations where we're in leadership, have a good process to make decisions, listen to people, gather consensus, pray, listen to the Lord. But once you make a decision, move forward in it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't still, on the one hand, you're moving forward, and on the other hand, you're remaining open and teachable because maybe you did miss it. And then a good leader, if he becomes or she becomes aware that they've made a mistake in this decision, they're very quick to own it and to say, hey, you know what? I really made a mistake in this decision. I felt like we should go left, but in reality, as we started moving left, I see we should move right. So I'm going to change the decision and move right. And I think if you do that in a humble way, people will appreciate that and respond to that. The temptation is to move forward, and then when a recognition does come that, oh, that was a wrong decision, the temptation for the leader is to say, well, I'm going to keep going because I want to save face. I want to look good. I don't want to admit I was wrong, because a lot of that comes from what we talked about at the beginning, some of the fears and concerns. I don't want to make a mistake. I want to say the right things. I don't want to give the wrong information. So leadership is in this case is yeah, you're on one hand moving forward in confidence, but on the other hand, recognizing that, okay, if I do recognize that I've made a wrong choice, that I'm quick to own that and change that. So those are some thoughts. I don't know if it's helpful, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
What I see mostly is like
Being in that position, with the experience that I had in DTS time. So within that week, there was a situation when my whole team wasn't happy with the decision they made. But then our outreach host came and he said like, this is the best thing that ever happened. And then team started celebrating, but like they already broke my heart.
Yeah.
But then like then I realized that it is a position where I also need to take blame.
Yeah.
And when something good happens, then I need to like, okay, it is ours.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, what I've seen is like sometimes being in that position, it is hard to recognize our own mistakes. So like, how can being in that position, like we can really keen look at ourselves to notice our own mistakes.
Yeah. Having a team around you, or asking trusted people for feedback. Hey, can you give me honest feedback? And being willing to to respond to that feedback. You know, we want to be people who receive feedback, but part of that requires a willingness to change if the feedback is such that you realize, oh, I should change. So have a team around you, be willing to receive feedback from people. Also, I think just recognizing that as leaders, as a leader, you're going to make a mistake. I can tell you in the 5 years I've been leading here at the base, I've made mistakes. I'm convinced of it. I'm sure I could name a couple that I'm aware of. I'm sure other people could probably add to that list. So as a leader in the body of Christ, not just in your church, but in your tribe or in your school or in the business you run or wherever you're called to, you will not do it perfectly. You will make a mistake. And that's where character comes in. A willingness to humbly admit that, a willingness to ask for forgiveness, and a willingness to forgive yourself and say, hey, you know what? As a leader, I just blew it. Sometimes the hardest thing when you blow it as a leader, everyone in the room generally gives you the forgiveness. Sometimes the hardest part is you forgiving yourself and moving on, you know? And so, it has helped me to lead because I tell myself, you know what? I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to make a mistake. And I want to do the best I can, but I don't want to be afraid of being less than perfect. I want to, as best as I can, give just who I am in all my strengths, in all my limitations, in all my areas of brokenness. I just want to, you know, I can only be myself. And that's the best thing a leader can give those he's leading is yourself as you are, with your strengths, with your limitations, with your brokenness. But I feel like it takes the pressure off knowing that we're not called to be perfect leaders in the sense of making no mistakes. Yes, there's character. We want to be as perfect in our characters, much like Christ as we can be. But there hasn't been anyone in leadership, apart from one, who has never sinned, who's never messed up. You know, we know Jesus. I think he is fully human when he walked the earth. And I think he might be the one that you could say he didn't make any mistakes. Mistakes aren't always sin. Some mistakes are, but mistakes are just mistakes. So in that sense, I think, it takes the pressure off when we know that there's freedom and room there to make mistakes. And people you lead will give you the room to make those mistakes to the degree that you give them the room as their leader to make mistakes. If you're hard on those you're leading and you make them toe a difficult line, then they're going to, when you mess up, they're maybe going to respond in that way. Not necessarily right, but you want to create the environment that, like I said, the golden rule, to do unto others treat others the way you would want to be treated. So as a leader, treat your people that you're leading, that you're responsible for, treat them the way you would want them to treat you if you did whatever it is they do. Good. One more question. Yes.
Yeah. This also comes with media. In outreach, and I was student leader,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we didn't have staff with us. So basically, Muslim and the Muslim, I think, in a very difficult situation. And sometimes I feel maybe that somewhere I fail, or maybe I didn't do it better, or maybe I did the best I can. How do you get people to make sure that they do something that's supposed to be done? Because we went outreach and we were about to finish, but I felt like everybody was this kind of them, they become very difficult. They become to work, it's becoming hard, and at the same time, the school needs to make sure they do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And also, we sometimes we share them together.
Yeah.
And does it put a leader in a situation where sometimes you feel isolated?
Yeah.
It's to address the situation.
Yeah.
Mostly we don't agree with this thing.
Yeah.
So I was sharing a room with Joshua and other students. They are my friends, and sometimes they see a different person than when I'm speaking of my friend.
Yeah.
So it was a difficult situation to balance between having a relationship
Mm-hmm.
and also making these things at work.
Yeah.
So and sometimes you don't give honest answers or honest questions
Yeah.
because of the relationship.
Yeah.
And then you think that we need honest conversation
Yeah.
to make decisions.
Yeah.
But sometimes maybe they feel because he's my friend,
Mm-hmm.
they can just do whatever he's doing.
Yeah.
And that one will lead to a crisis. So as a leader, which options do you have to make sure that you get the best for them or you get the best out of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're in a situation where you're leading and it's a challenging season or challenging times, I mean, a couple thoughts have come to mind. One is just continuing to ask for honest feedback, even if it means don't, please, Johnny, don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear in that. It is not easy to, I think it's easy to lead strangers because you just tell them what to do, you know. But it's a challenge to bring leadership when you have friends. That is that can be, you know, as the author said, that can be the best of times and it can be the worst of times, because when you have to lead friends and who are your friends, and you have to make decisions that maybe they're not going to like, or they're going to hurt, that will hurt them temporarily. But you know that that's the right decision to make. Yeah, that's hard and that's difficult. As far as when you're leading a group of people or you're leading a team and you realize there's just a bit of time left, but people are really wore out and tired, and how do I motivate them? How do I move them forward? I heard some of that question in your story there. One thing I do in situations like that is, if I recognize, hey, the group of people that I'm responsible for, they've hit a wall, life is difficult, things are difficult. I look for ways to have fun with them. Let's go have ice cream together. Whatever your setting is, if it's summer here in Wheeler, let's go down to the river and swim in the river and have a barbecue together. I know that we had this, that, and the other things scheduled, but I look around and I realize people are wore out and tired and they're struggling. So let's just lighten the mood a bit. You need to, in situations where you sense a team is stuck and you feel like people are tired and have lost motivation and energy, you need to be discerning. What is a good thing I can do to take the pressure off? Because that's what everyone is feeling, is pressure. So that's one way I like to handle it. Other people would find ways to encourage them with their words and their actions and kind of get behind them and push them forward. That I think is another way as well. So it depends some on your personality and your leadership style, who you are as a person. But I have found in situations similar to what you described, when I lower the pressure a bit by doing something that's fun and enjoyable, all of a sudden people can relax a bit and enjoy a different action or a different perspective, and then they wake up the next morning with a bit more energy and willingness to push through the difficulty. So I'm not saying that you go out and throw your schedule out every day and just have fun the whole time. But there is a place where just doing something like that can really help people get refreshed and gain perspective. Yep. Hey, these are really good questions, and I enjoy that. I feel like that's the best way of learning, when questions come and we can have conversation and dialogue. We'll make time for that for sure again tomorrow to do that. Just want to touch real briefly, because I have till 12:15, right? Okay. I just want to touch real briefly on how worldview shapes leadership. So I know from the inputs you've had about reinterpretation, and then when Bart was here in the beginning, and Tom Bloomer even touched base on it a bit about the 4 worldview questions, the 4 ways that shape our worldview: ontology, epistemology, axiology, and teleology. Remember those? We're going to look just very briefly at how those views impact our leadership. So there's the short answers to them. Ontology deals with what is real. Tom Bloomer taught about that, and probably Bart did as well. But ontology, one of the things it looks at is what is real. Our view of reality will shape how we lead. If we have a materialistic worldview, we will lead probably out of power and with a desire for results and with an ability to control. A biblical worldview will recognize God's sovereignty, will recognize that there is both the physical world and the spiritual world, will incorporate servant leadership. And a big thing, a biblical worldview really focuses on people, because people are made in the image of God. So a leader who has a biblical ontology will see people as created in God's image, and will value them, give them dignity, and will lead with compassion. They see leadership not merely as a function or a skill, but as deeply rooted in the nature of being, the being of God and the being of those who carry his image. And that gets reflected that, yes, people are made in the image of God. Distortion has come from sin, but there's redemption through Jesus Christ. True biblical leadership, what I started with at the very beginning, is relational. And because it's relational, it's self-giving. We give ourselves to others. And it's rooted not so much in our own human ambition as leaders. It's rooted in the authority that God gives to bring leadership. So point number 2, epistemology. Epistemology has to deal with, how do we know the truth? How do we know what's true? And how do we discover truth? So leaders are going to make decisions on where they get their truth from. So if we have a worldview that depends solely on human reasoning, our leadership will bring a lot of proven methods, programs and methods that have been tested over time and work. So if you do this 10 times, you will get the same result 10 times. That could be a worldview that sees human reasoning as the way forward. If you have a worldview that takes human reasoning, you also, there won't be a lot of change from year to year. So for example, in a YWAM setting, we have to guard against running a DTS or an SBCW or whatever school, running them the same way every year, year after year after year, with the same speakers and the same teachers and the same books and the same assignments. That makes it easier to put together, but a key component we want to do that only if we're listening to the Lord and we're asking to the Lord as we're building this school, saying, Lord, you know the students who are coming to this DTS. Which speakers do you want to have come for these students? And we take time to listen to the Lord. I think there are things that you can develop a bit of rhythm. You don't have to change all the time, everything, but we want to avoid just doing it the same way we've always done it because it worked the last time we did it, because it's about people. And so your SBCW has a particular group of students. Next year, when the SBCW is here, there's going to be a totally different set of students who are from different places, who have different personalities, who have different experiences. And so the Holy Spirit will lead the staff team to put together a school that will fit those people if we take the time to listen rather than just chuck. So that's important, I think. A biblical epistemology of leadership is rooted in divine revelation. We get as followers of Jesus, we get our knowledge from revelation that God gives. His revelation comes through Scripture. His revelation comes through creation. His revelation comes through his Spirit speaking to us. His revelation can come through another human being speaking to us. But our knowledge comes from, and knowledge helps the leader make decisions. So we want, as biblical leaders, we want to make decisions because we've heard from the Lord. And we want to be people who lead in a humble dependence on God. We want to be motivated by that and not human ambition. A biblical epistemology of leadership is in contrast with secular views of leadership, which emphasize power or charisma. You know, we look for this dynamic speaker, this person who can captivate a crowd. Those are gifts, and there's a place for that. But what's most important is godly wisdom and character and servanthood. Secular view of leadership would tend to focus on charisma or power, or what's big in the States and maybe in Europe too, but what's really big in the States is pragmatism. If it works, it must be true. Oh, look, I did something, it produced certain good results, then it must be true. There's a place for that, but don't make that an absolute. Just because something works doesn't mean it's true. So we want to be led with hearing God's voice to help us make decisions, to discover what is true, and then to lead through that. Axiology talks about what is valuable, and that shapes our ethics and our priorities. Biblical values would prioritize love and justice and sacrifice and service. Secular values might prioritize efficiency, profit, self-promotion, and of course, self-recognition for the leader. I make decisions because I want to be seen. I want to be noticed. I want to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak. Yeah, so biblical leadership is God-centered, is morally absolute, and recognizes that it has eternal significance. It reflects God's character, a servant's heart. It focuses on kingdom priorities. So a very familiar verse. This can be our priority as we lead people. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. God has told us what is good, and this is what he requires of us as leaders, that we would do what's right, that we would do justice, that we would love mercy, and we would walk humbly with God. If we as people who are called by Christ to bring influence in people's lives, if we can live and do what is just, and if we can love mercy and be generous with mercy, and if we can walk humbly with God as we bring leadership, then we're living out a biblical axiology of leadership. And then finally, teleology has to do with what is the purpose, or where are things going? Our purpose as leaders influences our approach. So if the goal of my leadership ultimately, again, whether I'm leading a YWAM base, or whether I'm pastoring a church, or whether I think you're going to have Jürgen here next week. He works as in a business. He's a leader within his company. If your goal and your purpose within that is God's glory and to advance and grow the kingdom, then your leadership will be reflected by humility, by service, and by sacrifice. Your leadership will be others-centered, others being God-centered, and then others-centered around you. It will not be about building your kingdom and developing your skills in such a way that you can put that on your resume and get a better job later on in the future. Some of that might happen and come to pass, but that's not your motivation. Your motivation is you want to lead with humility. If the goal of our leadership is personal achievement, then leadership becomes self-serving and becomes all about me. And we see that, see, how do I want to say this in a good way? I really like, okay, so speaking of my home country, I really like some of the policies that our current administration is pushing forward. I have a lot of concern about our current leadership's desire for personal achievement and always talking about I this and I that. The president had a speech that was 1 hour and 48 minutes that he gives yearly, and those are normal, but a lot of what you heard in it was I this, I that, I this, I that. So I like the policies, but we, as biblical leaders, we don't want to be about personal achievement. We need to recognize, one, that God can and will use anyone. I think scripture is full of that. There are stories in the Bible where God has used some of the most biblical, most humble, most Christ-like character people. And then God has also used some of the most broken, most weak, we would probably label them evil people as well. God can and use anyone. He used a donkey. He certainly can use people, even if they are less than perfect. But God wants us to be the best leaders and the best influencers that we can be. And we do that best when we reflect him. So be aware of your challenges, be aware of your limitations, be dependent upon God to grow you so that you can reflect him, because that's when we're the best leaders, is when we reflect Jesus Christ. So those are just a short worldview, how our worldview in these 4 areas impacts our leadership. What area do you currently see that you have influence in right now? It'd be good to talk about that, hear from one another, where you see you have influence. And then we'll look at a few stories of people in the Bible where they brought leadership in, where they brought influence in. We want to look at this relationship between leading and following, and how those relate together. We'll spend some time looking at Jesus as an example, as the example for what biblical leadership should be, and unpack some things from his life. We will listen to an audio story that helps emphasize that. And then we'll finish up with some conclusions and things like that. We can see after the break, maybe right after the break, we can just have some time for Q&A. Some of those questions came up spontaneously yesterday, and I want to leave room for that as well. So if we have those, we can bring those in at that time and talk about those. So it's kind of the blueprint. We will see where we go. So ended our time yesterday looking at the worldview behind leadership and how worldview impacts our leadership. And then I left us with this question for you all to think about, and we'll discuss now, is what area do you have influence in right now? So that can be an area of responsibility. It also can be people. What people in your life do you have influence in right now? And you could add to that, what area will you, after you finish the school, will you be stepping into where you'll have influence? So anything in that direction. So as you took time to think about that, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts were. What I want us to see. We often think of leadership as position or a title, and it is that, but it's not just that. Whenever someone comes to us, like your teacher friends, and they say, "Awesome, what do you think about that? What is your opinion on fill in the blank?" As soon as you offer your opinion, you're bringing influence, and that is leadership. And I think we need, all of us, myself included, we need to continue to see that on that level, that we actually have a lot of leadership, and we actually have a lot of opportunity to bring influence. And when we are aware that that is leadership, as well as having a title or having a position, but most importantly, this influence, and I know I'm not the first person to tell you this, you've probably been hearing it throughout the school, that leadership is influence. So whenever we are in a situation where we have the opportunity to bring influence in, we're bringing leadership in. And as I said yesterday, I want us all to continue to see ourselves more and more each day as leaders, as people who can influence, and not who just can, but who are called to influence. I remember early on in my YWAM life, I think I had been on staff for a year, so I was still single. And everyone, it seemed, at the YWAM base I was a part of, and others that I had been at, everyone knew what their calling and what their purpose was. This person was called to DTSs, and the other person on staff, they wanted to really focus on outreach teams that come to the island and serve and bless them. And I was really struggling with this because I didn't have this one area that I felt like I was called to, or this one position that I felt like I should invest myself into. And I was really frustrated because everyone around me seemed so comfortable with knowing where they were going and what they were called to. And so I was chatting with our base leader about that, and he said, you know, David, perhaps the Lord is telling you to not look at for what position of leadership God is calling you to, but to be able to, in any situation, bring leadership in, whether it's working with DTSs or whether it's helping outreach teams or whether it's serving in the kitchen, but look to bring leadership into every situation. And that was a real help for me at that time, and it's continued to grow my understanding. Even today, I try to constantly tell myself, I can bring leadership into any situation, whether I'm leading a staff afternoon as part of my responsibilities as base leader, or whether I'm sitting having a coffee with Ezra and Seema and chatting about things. I can bring leadership into that. And so, Balsam, you really hit the nail on the head in that. We have influence in every relationship we have. And I want us to see that, and I want us to keep that in mind as we continue through the day, because leadership is about, you guys are going to be putting a project together, a business model you're working on, and you're going to be running with that once you leave the school and looking for ways to bring that in. And that is leadership. And so you'll be bringing leadership into that, but you will also be bringing leadership into the young people back in Canada that you connect with. And so just to keep that in mind, I think this is the positional leadership, the business model, the project of leadership. But some of what we'll talk about today is okay, how do we live that out? What are the character traits? What are the things behind this that we can bring into it? So I want us to look at some biblical examples of leaders who brought influence. We'll talk about this for a few minutes, 3 different stories. We'll start with the first one. How many know the story of David and Goliath? So to summarize that story really quickly, Goliath was this big, huge giant that was from which people group?
Philistines.
The Philistines, yep. And they were, they were fighting against the people of Israel. And Goliath came out and challenged the people of Israel and said, if you kill me, all of the Philistines will become your servants. But if I kill one of your people, then all of Israel has to follow us. So that was his challenge. And then David comes along. David's not actually a soldier at the moment, but he comes along and he hears this. And he tells King Saul, he says, I'll go out and fight this Philistine guy. He possesses courage and faith and says, I'm going to go out and fight. And then what happened? After he said, Saul, I'm going to go out and fight, what did he do? Did he actually fight? Goliath?
He took stones.
Yeah, he took a stone, and that was his way of fighting. He took a stone and hit Goliath in the head, and what happened? Killed him, chopped his head off, and then what happened? Once Goliath died, do you know what happened in the story?
Sunday school knowledge.
Yeah. So after Goliath died, the people of Israel were able to conquer the Philistines. So here is a young man who brought tremendous influence into a situation. Now, I want to ask you a question. What was David's title and position at that time? He was just a shepherd boy.
He was a food runner.
Yep. He wasn't anything glorious. He wasn't even a soldier in the army, you know, so he wasn't a recruit or a sergeant or a general. He wasn't a king. He was just the brother of 3 people who were in the army. He was just an everyday, non-leader type person. And yet, he brought leadership in. He brought influence into a situation that didn't just change his family, it changed an entire nation, or actually 2 entire nations. It changed the Philistines because they all of a sudden came under Israel, and it changed the nation of Israel because they got victory over their enemies. So, just a great example to me of someone who brings influence without waiting for a title or position. I think that's been my trap sometimes in my life, and maybe it is for others. We feel like we have to wait until we're recognized as a leader in order to lead. We feel like, oh, I have to wait until someone invites me to be school staff, or I have to wait until someone makes me the manager of a department in the business I work for, and then I can lead. And we wait and wait and wait, and those invitations don't come, those opportunities don't come. And I think David is a good example who doesn't wait until he's given a role or a position. He brings leadership. What about Esther? What do we know the story what do we know about the story of Esther?
She was born.
She was born, yeah.
She was born.
She was bold, yeah.
She was the voice of her people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She was the bold. She was the voice of her people. Do you remember the story?
Yeah.
She was one of among however many people the king chose to be his concubine, in essence. And do you remember when she found out that the people of Israel were being threatened, what her uncle asked her to do?
To go in front of the king
Mm-hmm.
and to ask directly, like have a direct request to the king.
Yeah.
And like it was significant because as like Esther's position, she wasn't queen yet, I believe.
Right. Yes.
And
That's
yes,
important.
she was just a concubine, and it was under that time, it was instant death if you were to go meet the king unannounced, right? But despite that, she went up,
Yeah.
and she requested the king to save her people, essentially, and then she also talked about it's not Mordecai, who's the evil advisor.
Haman.
Haman, yeah.
Thanks, VeggieTales.
And yeah, and then she told the king about the plans, and then yeah, so basically she like that was a huge bold move
Yeah.
of being the voice of the people, and like it was a leadership where she was the only one that was able to do it to save the people.
Yeah.
Right, because the king didn't know what was being manipulated by him.
Yeah.
Right, so like she had to go and tell him.
It would have been, thank you, very good. It would have been one thing if she was a queen, but she had tremendous boldness and sacrifice and courage. She stepped out and approached the king knowing he will either listen and receive me or he will kill me. She was, the only thing she was special in and had a special role was that she was one of a bunch of other women who were the king's concubines. So she wasn't living on the street. She was a step up, but I don't think that was a leadership role that she had. So she was just one among a bunch of ladies. And she just decided, you know what? I'm going to try to bring influence in this situation.
I'm going to be bold. I'm going to step out in courage. It might cost me something, but I want to influence this situation. And then finally, the story of the Good Samaritan. We're all familiar with that story. So there is a guy walking on the road, and some robbers come and beat him up and leave him for dead. They rob him, they steal him. And then different people come through and see him. And the first two people don't help him. And then we have a Samaritan who comes and does help. He recognizes the need of this person and says, I want to bring influence in this situation. I want to change this situation. So he responds in compassion. He bandages his wounds. He pours oil on them. He takes the man up, in the story it says, and puts him on his donkey and brings him to a hotel. And then he tells the owner of the hotel, hey, keep this guy for the night. And if he needs to stay longer or if he needs anything, I will pay for it. So he responds in generosity to bring about the change in the situation. And again, this was just, the first two guys that came by, one was a priest, had a role, a position. The other was a Levite, who also had a role and a position and a title. And this Good Samaritan, what we know of him is he was just a person whose cultural identity was Samaritan. The Bible doesn't tell us that he had a role or responsibility. He was just an average Samaritan at the time. No title, no position, but he brought influence. He brought leadership in. And there are many other Bible stories that we could look at. Some of the Bible stories, you can see very clearly, the people do have a role, a title, responsibility delegated to them, and they bring leadership in. But there are just as many, if not more, stories throughout the Bible where just everyday, ordinary people like you and me bring influence into a situation, bring leadership into a situation. So I continue to hammer this point because I think it's God's heart for his people that we see that is leadership, that we are leaders. You can tell yourself, I am a leader. Go ahead, tell yourself that. Do you believe it?
Yes.
We've got to change our thinking. We need to be renewed in this on a daily basis, because what the world tells us leadership is primarily is it's the big people. It's the higher ups, the elites, the ones that have the responsibility and the titles. It's whether that's the president of your country or whether that's the owner and the CEO of the business you work for. That's what the world screams leadership is. And I want to hear me clearly, that is leadership, but that is not the only leadership. Questions, comments?
May I ask you to say a little bit on Joseph's leadership?
Joseph, the Old Testament Joseph,
Yes.
or Joseph, the New Testament Joseph?
The Old Testament.
Okay. Yeah, so what do we know of his life? He was one of 12 brothers, right? And then how does his story go? He had a couple dreams. He told his dad, he told his brothers. They didn't like that. They thought, boy, what an arrogant young man he is. So his brothers are out taking care of the sheep, and they see him coming. And what do? They sell him into slavery. Does he, no title, no position yet. He's in the house of Potiphar. Potiphar buys him. He becomes Potiphar's servant. So that's just it's a title, but it's not like a high up title. And what happens to Potiphar's house and to Potiphar's possessions as a result of Joseph bringing influence in?
I think something that I remember from this story, he is a man with such integrity and have high regard for even Potiphar, even though he was servant in his house. Because when his wife tried to sort of seduce him, he really ran out and he said, "You're wife of my master." And that is such an integrity, or even, it's little bit unusual situation when woman is forcing herself on him, but he has such a high regard. I mean, he was slave in that house. And I think with this integrity or for his master, that set him higher and higher, and he became in charge of so many things in that. And even when the famine happened, that he was the only one who had all this store filled with different grain and things. I don't know, I think this, how God led him, or the hardships or something, he still kept his principles or something.
He had massive integrity even before he had a ruler position. When he was just a servant, we heard the story. But even before that, when he was in Potiphar's house, before Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him, the Bible tells us, as a servant in Potiphar's house, everything he did was successful. Kind of like whatever he touched turned to gold for Potiphar. To the point where Potiphar said, "I don't have to worry about anything because I have this Joseph here, and whatever he does, things go well for me." So here, no title other than a slave, which is interesting when we talk about Jesus. Just a slave, but having tremendous influence. And then he flees from Potiphar's wife, and she tells Potiphar a lie, and then Joseph ends up in jail, and he has influence in jail as well. It says he ends up in jail, but the jailers didn't have to worry about anything, because everything Joseph did while he was a prisoner, God prospered, and so they didn't have to worry about him. And then these two guys come along, and they have these dreams. And again, he's just a prisoner. He's got no title, no role, no position. But they have dreams. He interprets the dreams. He brings influence into that situation, and one of the dreams come true. One of them gets released, and the other one dies. And Joseph gets stuck in prison still. And then 2 years more go by, and Pharaoh has a dream, and through some certain events realizes, I need to talk to Joseph. So Joseph is a prisoner. Joseph is not one of the magicians of Egypt, one of the spiritual priests of Egypt. He is not a leader in the army of Egypt. He's a prisoner. No title, no influence, seemingly. He comes in and he Pharaoh says, "I've had this dream." And what does Joseph do? I find it really interesting because Joseph interprets the dream correctly, which is what Pharaoh asked him to do. So he easily could have stopped there and said, "Here's the dream. Your nation is going to have 7 years of blessing and prosperity and good crops, and then you're going to have 7 years of famine." End of statement. That's all Pharaoh asked him to do. Pharaoh didn't ask him, "Well, what should I do about that?" Joseph took a risk in sharing his wisdom and advice. He easily could have been killed by Pharaoh because Pharaoh didn't ask him for his wisdom and advice. He didn't say, "Well, what should I do?" He said, "Tell me what my dream means." But Joseph, as a prisoner, took the opportunity to influence and said, "Here's your dream, and now here's what you should do. You should appoint someone over all of the agriculture in the land so that they can store it up and manage it in a good way so you'll have famine, or so you'll have food during the famine." That
that was bringing influence, even in a situation where he wasn't asked to do that. If you look at the story, he was only asked to interpret. So the part of hiring, finding someone and putting in charge of all the agriculture, that was Joseph taking a risk and bringing influence, and maybe not realizing that Pharaoh was like, that is really good wisdom. Well, since you're giving me that wisdom, why don't you do that job? And then he became a government official, and that's usually where we talk about the story of Joseph, where he had influence as a leader in Egypt. But he was acting and living as a leader long before he got that role. And that's what's, I think, important to see.
I think what is brought it, I am more thinking, I like this is one of my favorite story. I remember it. Often the leadership, we all act out of who we are, it really gives down identity kind of, and he has all, I think he has such a good attitude towards in hardships. He kept doing a good thing that is good for himself, for others, and I think that really helped him to come higher or even become, kind of responsible, or where he was later in such a high position. So he reacted. He had this attitude to do good.
Yeah, and I think my point as we look at these Bible characters and stories, you all are aware, just from our conversation at the beginning, that you all have influence in some way, shape, or form in some people's lives. Some of you might have official roles or responsibilities, but some might not. Some have a mix of both. But don't wait until you're given an official role or an official title. Don't wait to lead until that comes. Be leaders today. Be people of influence today. Because what you're doing is you're building your character, you're building your leadership strength and your leadership muscles in small ways today, that at some point, when the door does open for you to have a role or a position or a responsibility where you're recognized as a leader, you're going to know what to do, because you've been living it already. But if you're not living it, if you're just kind of waiting for the future till it comes, when that time comes, you might be less prepared for it. So lead out today in your areas of influence. Be faithful with that small leadership that you have. And if that grows and gets bigger, then you're equipped and prepared. So I want to look at now for a few minutes this idea of following well in order to lead well. So kind of it involves mentoring a bit. But again, some examples, and I keep talking about the Bible. I keep referring to Bible stories because that's where the principles come from for biblical leadership. There's a lot of good material that we can read that shows us how that's applied in the area of government, or in the area of education, or in the area of business, or in the area of arts and celebration, or science and technology. Those books that are written well are showing you the application of some of the biblical principles. What I want to do in these couple of days is make sure all of us have a deepening biblical foundation, so that we can apply it in our particular situation or setting. So there are at least 3 examples of people who were following before they became leaders. So Joshua didn't just wake up one day as the leader of the people of Israel. He walked alongside of Moses for a season. He was Moses' assistant, some translations say, but he was learning how to do things by walking with Moses. And there was a story that says a lot about Joshua. Moses and Joshua would go into the tent in Exodus 33, and that's where they would meet God. That's where God would talk with them. His presence would show up. One day they were doing that, and Moses and Joshua are in there, and the story says that Moses met God face to face, and they were talking. They had their conversation, and then Moses left the tent to go about his task. The story tells us that Joshua continued, even when Moses left, he continued to stay in the tent. So he was learning through Moses about the value and the importance of relationship with God. But Joshua was someone who followed Moses before he became the leader of Israel, who brought the people of Israel into the promised land and then helped settle the people of Israel, divided up the land for the various tribes, and really created the structure for the nation of Israel. We can see the example between the two prophets. Elijah was the first prophet, and there was a guy, Elisha, who came after him. Well, they walked together for a season. How many confuse Elijah and Elisha? How many get confused over which one was first?
But yeah.
I'll give you a little tip to, at least in English it works, but I'll give you a little tip on how to remember which one comes first. Elijah has a J in his name, and Elisha has an S in his name. J comes before S in the alphabet. So Elijah was the first one, the J, and then Elisha came along, and they worked together, and he was the second one. That's just a little tip that has saved me a ton of headaches. When someone shared that with me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so good, so helpful. So
Why they have to have similar names? There should be.
I know.
To be honest, for the longest time, I didn't even know Elisha existed.
Can you? Yeah.
I didn't even know Elisha was an actual person after Elijah.
Can you imagine like Sema being a prophet, and then the Lord sends Sina to come work alongside of her, and just all the confusion it would cause. So yes. So here's an example of following and learning how to lead before actually stepping into that. And so the disciples were the same thing. Jesus said, hey, come follow me. And so they followed him for 3 years. And they, if we read the story, sometimes it doesn't seem like they're learning too well. But they're walking with him, they're following him, they're learning from him. And then Acts 1:8, Jesus says, the Holy Spirit's going to come, and you'll be my witnesses throughout Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And then Jesus leaves, and now they're stepping into leadership in a responsible position kind of way, and they're moving forward. So the importance of wherever you find yourself in, find people who would invite you to walk alongside of them and learn from their leadership, but also find people that you would call to walk alongside of you so they can learn from you. The example of Paul and Timothy. Paul, in the New Testament, he was this super apostle, and he found this young guy, Timothy, and said, hey, Timothy, walk with me for a bit. Let me mentor you. Let me invest in you so that you can become all God has for you to be. And what I want us to do is that I want us to realize we should be finding, who is that Paul in our life? Who are those Pauls that God is want to put in our life that we can learn from, that we can follow? It sounded like Balsam yesterday shared about Claudia, is that her name? That she is a bit of a Paul for her. So she has found this Paul. What I also want you to do, Balsam, is I want you to find the Timothys in your life. Who is a Timothy in your life that you can pour into? And it's the same for all of us. Who are the Pauls in our life? But also, who are the Timothys in our life? Who does God want us to say, hey, come walk with me for a little bit. Let's grow together.
Learn from how I influence so that you can learn how to influence, because one day you're going to go further than me. So I think it's good to have both in our lives, Paul's and Timothy's. It's often we seek after the Pauls, and that's good, but we're not so intentional to find the Timothys. And I think we should be looking out for people who can learn from us, not in a proud way, but in a way, hey, I want to pour into you. I want you to grow. I want you to develop. Come, let's walk together. So these are some examples of following well to lead well. There's another example that I want us to look at a little closer. Following well to lead well, it involves what I call the two-way authority principle. So there is a story in Luke chapter 7. A Roman officer has a slave. A Roman officer has a slave who is sick and near death. And this officer hears about Jesus, and so he sends some respected Jewish elders to Jesus and says, hey, please come heal this servant of this Roman officer. This Roman officer deserves your help. He loves the Jewish people. He even built a synagogue for the people. So please, Jesus, come heal this officer's servant. And Jesus starts to go with them. But the officer, I think maybe this is my interpretation, perhaps he heard that Jesus is coming, and he was like, this isn't necessary. So he sends some more people back to Jesus, and he says, Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my home. I'm not worthy of such an honor. I'm not even worthy to come and meet you, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. And this is what he says. He says, I know you can just speak a word and he'll be healed, because I am under the authority of my superior officers, and I have authority over soldiers. So he's under the authority of his superiors, and he gives authority to those under him. So because of that, Jesus says, I tell you what, I haven't seen such faith in all of Israel, and he brings healing. So there's something interesting about this guy. This guy recognizes this two-way authority. He recognizes that he is under authority, and he also recognizes that sometimes he's the one who gives authority to people. And so the principle, the point I'm trying to make is, if you want to be a good leader, how many want to be a good leader? Not sure. Richie's like, this could be a trick question.
Come on, Richie. You are a good leader.
If you want to be a good leader, learn to be a good follower. Learn to follow well. So what does it mean to follow well? It means a few things. It means be teachable. Be willing to allow yourself to be taught. Be open to other people's ideas. Everybody, we have this saying in America, I don't know if you have it or not. We have this saying that says, everybody hates a know-it-all. Have you ever come across people who, everybody hates a know-it-all? Someone who has the attitude that they know everything. You don't need to instruct them because they know everything about everything. That's an attitude sometimes. We don't want to have that attitude. If we want to be a good follower, we want to be teachable. We want to be open to be taught by our leaders, by others around us. We want to live with the mentality as followers, and then I'll get your question. We want to live with the mentality that I can learn something from anyone. Anyone can teach me anything. Yes, George.
Yeah, I have a question based on the example that you gave was that we learn from somebody else.
Mhm.
You can forward to somebody else to what you know, and sometimes maybe I'll be a bit away from the Christian context
Yeah.
and share some world examples.
Yeah.
For example, sometimes we find somebody compromising what he believes in because maybe he's under somebody.
Mhm.
For example, if it happens, somebody is a president,
Yeah.
and you are the deputy president,
Yeah.
and you need to agree with everything about what he talks about, everything that he shares, and we find people coming to say things that they didn't believe in that person, but once he gets a position,
Mhm.
then he says, I was mistaken because I didn't really believe on what I said.
Right.
But now I think this president is a good man.
Yeah.
For example, Trump and Vance.
Mm-hmm.
Vance was critical about Trump
Mhm.
some years back, and he said a lot about him.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's a deputy president,
Yeah.
and he says that, this guy is good. I take back what I said.
Yeah.
So is compromising some things, or maybe sometimes it's difficult, or it's aware that you just have to be in line with the person who is in front of you,
Yeah.
ahead of you, or
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a good question. So let's use this example. So Trump and Vance.
Yeah.
Okay. On the one hand, let's ask ourselves, do we grow in our understanding and beliefs over time, or are they fixed for all eternity? Maybe that's not asked so well. Has anyone ever believed something and then later on they realize I have to change because I have new information, I have new knowledge, I have new understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe that was the case. I don't know, but let's assume, but that is a reality. We all have beliefs, we all have things that we believe to be true, and then as we grow and as we build relationships and as we gain understanding, that those may change. So, but let's also assume the other side. Let's look at what if Vance is compromising his beliefs just because now he's vice president, and so he's got a nice role and he's cushy and he doesn't want to say anything bad because he likes his job now, so he's compromised himself. What can we learn from J.D. Vance with that?
You can say lack of integrity.
We can learn, yes. We can learn the importance of integrity. We can learn from a negative example the importance of not compromising. So in that case, we can learn from J.D. Vance either way. We can learn that, yeah, we say things, but we need to be open to learn and grow and teach. But we can also learn, if it's the case, that, oh, wow, he compromised his belief. What I'm learning from his life is I need to hold fast to what I know to be true and not compromise and not be tempted by power and position. Even, I'm just going to hold to my beliefs, even if that means I don't get the position. So I will not interpret which one Vance is, whether his beliefs, he got to know Trump more, he got more information, and then he changed, or whether he has actually compromised. In my opinion, it's not really my job to judge, because those are questions of motivation and those are questions of attitude. And the only one that I'm aware of who can truly know people's hearts is God. So I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I think in this example, I think it's a really good example because it could have gone either way. But in either way, we can learn something from Vance's life. We can learn to not be so dogmatic and be open to change our beliefs, but we can also learn we should hold our convictions tightly and be willing to not compromise, even if that means not getting the greatest seat of power and position. So I think we can learn from everyone. We can, and I think if we have this mentality, Lord, what can I learn from this person? I think there's always something we can learn. Yeah, good question. So we're talking about, so here's this guy who knew somehow he was comfortable with being under authority and being the one who delegates and gives authority. And we talked about if you want to be a good leader, learn to be a good follower. Be someone who is easy to lead. I think that's a real gift to your leader, to those who have a charge over you, that you cultivate this mentality that, hey, I want to make my leader's job easy. I want to be easy to lead. In fact, the Bible speaks about that. And so we'll look at that real briefly. Hebrews 13, verse 17 says, obey your leaders and do what they say. Sometimes that's so hard. We feel the weight of that. It's a real simple concept. Just if your leader asks you to do something, just do it. Now, again, if he asks you or she asks you to go out and kill someone, or go out and steal from someone, or go out and commit adultery with someone, of course, you don't follow that. But oftentimes, leaders ask us to do things that are really just preference. And we struggle with that and we wrestle with that. Well, I'm just going to do my own thing. I don't like what they're asking me to do, so I'm going to go my own way. The Bible says, just do what your leaders say. And he says that leaders' work is to watch over you. So assume that the reason your leader is with what he's asking you to do, it's under the perspective of he has a responsibility, she has a responsibility to watch over you. And they are doing that the best that they can. And not only that, your leaders who are asking you to obey, they're accountable for God. So if I ask Ezra to do something that's wrong, ultimately I'm accountable and responsible before God for what I ask people to do. So that's a weight of leadership, and most leaders usually take that in mind and think about that. And I want you all, as you step into areas of responsibility and leadership outside of the body of Christ, at a business or at a university or wherever that is, that you would keep that in mind, that you are responsible before God for decisions you make and what you ask those under your leadership to do. And then the writer of Hebrews continues to say, give your leaders reason to do their job with joy and not sorrow. Like, make leading easy for your leaders is what is being said here. Because it's not to your benefit, the writer says, to make their job sorrowful. So why does the writer of Hebrews want us to follow in this way? It seems to go against at least a lot of Western culture. You mean I just have to do what I'm told? I can't give my opinion. I can't speak up. I don't like what they're asking me to do. I want to do my own thing. What is the Holy Spirit saying to us in this connection? Because when we learn to follow that way, when we do have areas of responsibility and leadership and the shoe is on the other foot, we're going to be much more humble and gentle in how we lead people
and how we ask people to do things because we've been following for a season. And so it's learned by following, we learn how to be good leaders because we know what it's like on the other, when the shoe is on the other foot. We learned that, hey, when I was a follower, this person asked me something really difficult and that was hard. So as a leader, I'm going to think 2 or 3 times before I ask someone to do something. Do I really want them to do this? Because this could be hard and difficult for them. So by learning how to be a good follower, we learn how to be a good leader. You know what I discovered as I was preparing this teaching? I've kind of had the thought for a while, but I looked into it a bit, and there is a ton of material out there about how to be a good leader. There's very little material out there about how to be a good follower. Why is that?
Because
Nobody recruits the material about follower.
Yeah, who wants to read that?
but in reality, I think most people are followers. And I think why that is, it's there. No one wants to be a follower and accept the title that I'm a follower, but it's the reality.
Yeah, it's a reality. Most of us are followers. And we want to follow well. We want to be good followers. That's what the Bible calls us to anyway. The world may not tell us that, but the Bible tells us we should be good followers. We should follow our leaders well. We should make their job easier. And I think it's that I honestly believe as we cultivate that kind of lifestyle, when the Lord does open the door for positional responsibility, or somehow someone gives us the title, I'm a leader, we will be able to lead well because we have sown the seeds of a willingness to be easygoing. We will sow the seeds of I'm not going to push my agenda. We have already sown the seeds in their life of I'm not going to be rebellious, but I'm going to walk in obedience. So when we're leading, we're not going to lead from an attitude of rebellion, but we're going to lead from an attitude of submission, even to those who we're responsible for. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about YWAM. There may be other situations as well, other movements or businesses that work this way. But this following and leading simultaneously, I think YWAM creates opportunity for that in such a good way. Do you guys know that Seema is my boss for this school? She's the school leader. So as base leader, I come under her. I come under her authority. And she can tell you, I try to do the best that I can to do that. But at the end of the day, in situations, I listen to Seema because I'm a school staff person and she's the school leader. So we share ideas back and forth as a staff team. We talk together and stuff like that, but I recognize that I'm following Seema when I'm here on Mondays, when I'm in our staff meetings. I don't wear my base leader hat. I wear my school staff hat. And I told her before she asked, I don't know, last spring or sometime she asked if I would want to be part of the school. I told her I needed time to pray and think about it. But one of the reasons I wanted to staff the school with her is I really wanted to work under her leadership because I've watched her over the years do things in particular ways that I think, wow, it'd be fun to work with her. But on a Monday morning at staff prayer that I'm leading, I'm the base leader. And when Seema's there, Seema follows me. And this happens all the time in YWAM. I've even had it in meetings where in one moment I'm leading from the idea of base leader, and in the next moment, someone else in the room is leading from the DTS ministry leader side, and I'm underneath that. And it's being comfortable with being a follower and being a leader, recognizing that sometimes it's not always you're just the leader or you're just the follower. I think it happens in families a bit, at least in my relationship with my wife, Rebecca. So there are times in our relationship where I take the lead. And usually that area is in just a very practical area. There's more areas, but very practically, I take the lead in researching and finding out our travel plans, when we're going, where we're going, purchasing tickets, all of those things. She submits to me in that. I share my ideas with her, but she submits to that. But there are other times, particularly in managing our finances, which I'm not as gifted in as she is, where I submit to her. And I say, hey, you know what? I would really like to buy X. And she says, well, you know, looking at the finances, I don't know that we can buy that now. And that's okay. That's fine. If it's something really important to me, I might ask for more information. But at the end of the day, she's the one who's really anointed in our family to bring leadership in the area of finances. And so I submit to her opinion. I submit to her thoughts and ideas. And that's how we work our marriage. I think that's what Paul talks about when he says, be submitted to one another in reverence to the Lord. And then he says, now wives, you submit, and husbands likewise love your wife as he loves the church. But it's this idea, I think, as we follow Christ, we want to live this two-way authority. We want to be people who sometimes are over people. I don't like that word, but for sake of understanding it, sometimes we're over people, but sometimes we need to be under people as well, and we need to be willing to do that. And so I have learned in my journey, and I think Scripture backs it up, the better type of follower I am, the easier I make my leader's job. That creates attitudes and character and motivation within me that when I am leading, when I am over people, I'm going to be a more healthy and a more Christ-like leader because I know what it's like to be a follower. If I'm always the leader, somehow I lose touch with the people that I'm leading. I don't know how they feel. I don't know their struggles. I can't relate to them. There's another scripture, and then we'll get ready for a break, that talks about this. 1 Thessalonians 5, honor those who are your leaders. So this is the way it's written in the Greek. This is not a suggestion. This is what the Holy Spirit through Paul is commanding us to do. Honor your leaders. Show them respect and wholehearted love. Not because they do everything right or everything perfect, but because this is what a good follower does. A good follower shows respect, shows love, and it also says live peaceably with them. So yes, you can have conversations with your leaders. You can talk with them. You can share opinions with them. But do what you can do to be at peace with them as a follower, because you will also be leading. And you want to have those developed within you. And so this is something over the past 10 years or so that I've tried to grow in. I try to be a good follower. One, because this is what God asks of me. But two, I think by becoming a better follower, I actually become a better leader. Any questions, any thoughts, any disagreements? I don't mind disagreements.
Maybe a comment?
Yes.
Michael came to school, we were communicating with him,
Mhm.
like emails and WhatsApp. And it's something I noticed that there was a time he wrote an email to me. Like, you need to write the email in this format. Like,
Yeah.
you must enter your name.
Yeah.
You must, and how she responds to me in WhatsApp.
Yeah.
It's casual. Like,
Yeah.
how is your family? How are you doing, George? And
Yeah.
blessings.
Yeah.
So this first email gave me a different picture of her.
Uh-huh.
Like, I'm going to get a very tough lady.
Yeah.
Kind of a leader with very strict, you have to do this. But at the same time, how she responds with WhatsApp is a bit different. But I learned that this is an official letter,
Yeah.
and you have to respond it in an official way.
Yeah.
So she has to maintain her leadership ethics, and people have to follow that.
Yeah.
At the same time, she became flexible.
Yeah.
We can talk about other things
Yeah.
we're doing in WhatsApp, it's okay.
Yeah.
But when it's this is this, and this is this, and you have to respond in an official way.
Yeah.
So it was just something new to me. And
Yeah.
I learned I can respond anyway in the email, I can respond in WhatsApp, but nowadays I learned something from that day that if I'm responding to somebody in an official way,
Yeah.
I'll use the email.
Yeah.
If there's anything else, maybe WhatsApp, then yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I learned something from her, and
That's
I really
good.
appreciate it. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good recognizing that there are times where we're friends, we're peers with one another, and then there are times because of the roles that we have to respond a certain way. Sometimes Seema has to respond as a leader. Sometimes George has to respond as a student. That doesn't mean one is more valuable or important than the other. Roles do not equal value. And that's what the world tells us. The world tells us if you have a role or if you have a title, you are more valuable than someone who doesn't. But that's actually not biblical. Roles define responsibilities, but the value comes from our identity in Christ. And in all of that, our identity, we are all equal at the foot of the cross. No one is more valuable than anyone else, and no one is less valuable than anyone else. So that's a really good example. Roles, and I think too, and then I like to talk. I think we'll break in a minute, but in a business, you might not see that unless it's a business that has some biblical influence in it. A lot of times, businesses, they value relationship very low. So George probably wouldn't have gotten a WhatsApp message that's casual from his boss. He just would have gotten the official thing telling him what to do. Now, if you have a business and you're Christian, bring in the relational side because it's biblical. So you can cultivate that. But by and large, that gets missed a lot of times in businesses that are only in business to make profit. Because it's not about relationship as much as it's about making sure we make a lot of money. But recognizing this, that sometimes I'm leading and sometimes I'm following. Sometimes we're even on the same page with one another. We're just as peers. All right, yes?
You said roles does not have something value. I could
Yeah.
not get it.
Roles does not equal value. Yeah. And that is a big thing that the world tells us. That the ones who are most important are either the celebrities who have all the money or the ones who have the titles and the roles. But it's not biblical. We're all equal at the foot of the cross. We're all image bearers. We all carry the identity of God, so therefore we all have equal value.
There are different roles. Paul talks about roles between those who are employers and those who are employees. Paul talks about the roles of men in the marriage and roles of women in the marriage. Those are different, but they do not mean that the man is more important and the woman is less important. That is that's not a biblical perspective. And unfortunately, the church, sometimes with husband and wife, the church has kind of missed that. The church has said, oh, the man is more important because he's the head. And the woman she's not as important. She just needs to keep her mouth shut and submit. That's a wrong interpretation of Scripture. They just have different roles within their marriage in order to make that marriage be a biblical marriage that honors God and that takes care of their family in a good way. But the role of being the head doesn't make me more important than my wife, who has a different role. We're both equal. When we come to the cross, I'm no higher than she is. And so we need to switch our thinking. Okay, let's start with the first one.
You mentioned about being a rebellious leader.
Mm-hmm.
How does it look like?
What is your question?
A rebellious leader.
Rebellious.
Yeah. A leader.
Yeah. So what would a leader who leads through rebellion, what would that look like? I think they would tend to be very independent and certainly not lead within the team. They would, even in leadership, you don't have just total freedom to do whatever you want. Usually within the leadership of a company or a government or a church, there are guidelines or laws that need to be followed. In a business, you would have the business bylaws. In the church, you would have the church bylaws. In a government, you would have, at least in America, you have a constitution. So a rebellious leader is someone who disregards those guardrails that are in place and does his or her own thing separate and apart from those. Because even in leadership, most of the leadership I'm aware of, there's always, it's not that the leader has sole power to do whatever he wants or whatever she wants. There are always guardrails in place within, I think, all the spheres of society. And a rebellious leader would probably step out of those, be more comfortable stepping out of those, disregarding those, not submitting themselves, even as the head leader, not submitting themselves to those guidelines. Yep, question number 2.
Yes. You say that if we sow the seed as a good follower,
Yeah.
it will be easier for us to be a good leader.
Yeah.
But it does not prevent us from having very difficult followers. And I take my example. Even if I'm trying my best to be a good follower,
Mm-hmm.
when I am a leader, I always have very difficult person to lead.
Yeah.
So it means that the seed that I sow,
Yeah.
it does not mean that I will have also good followers when I will be a leader, even if I'm a good follower.
Yeah, it's true. It isn't, that's a good point. That is not a guarantee, but what it could help is that you will be able to lead difficult people in a good and a godly way. It'll never get rid of the fact that you might have hard people, but it will sow the character in you that you will be able to lead hard people in a godly way and maybe not give in to the temptation to lead them in a a difficult way because they're being difficult to you. Yeah, I wish there was something that would remove some formula that if I would just do this, then I would, when I step into leadership, everyone would be easy leaders. No, unfortunately, it's not reality. But it does. Being a good follower builds our character. And that will come out when we're leading and we're under pressure and fire because we don't have people who are easy to lead. Yeah. Yeah.
And my last question.
Yeah.
How about the gift of leadership?
Yeah.
There are people who just naturally lead people. It's just very easy for them to be a leader.
Yeah.
And for others, it's just too difficult.
Yeah.
They are better to be in the back, behind the, not in front as a leader, but behind.
Yeah. So leadership, there is leadership personality, you could say. Those who are more comfortable up front, who maybe in their communication are more inspiring and more motivating. We'll talk a little bit briefly about leadership as a spiritual gift in Romans 12. But I think those who are behind, who are more comfortable behind, are still leaders because they still can influence. And I'll give a good example. And I'll use my country again. Everyone knows Donald Trump as the leader. He is the upfront, the loudmouth, the one who sets the vision, the one who goes. But you know who are actually really influential leaders in my country? The people who write his speeches that you never see and you never know. But someone writes his speeches and then he looks at them and evaluates them, but he doesn't write those on his own. So he has a team of people called speechwriters behind him, and they write his speeches and they set the agenda out, and then he looks at it and he gives his edits, and then when he's up front, he delivers it with his personality and with his flair. But it's the people behind the scenes who have incredible influence over him in what he's going to say, and therefore incredible influence over the nation through what he says. So yeah, some people are more comfortable up front. We should always be open to allow ourselves to be stretched, to, be the person. So well, I'm not an upfront person, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to stretch myself, allow myself to grow. We should always look for those opportunities, knowing that God is not a type of God who will put us in situations where he will break us. But he does want us to grow. And sometimes that means doing something that doesn't come natural to us and is uncomfortable for us. And I've told this to people here on staff. It takes a tremendous amount of energy for me to lead through a Monday morning staff prayer or a Thursday afternoon staff afternoon, where I put the agenda together, and I actually spend an hour or so on Thursday mornings going through the meeting in my head. This is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm not going to say. This is how I'm going to make the connection between Marcus's announcement and Brigitte's announcement. These are the thoughts I'm going to have. It doesn't come natural to me. I work at it, I want to do well, and then I lead through it, and then at the end I'm exhausted. So there are a lot of times you find yourself in situations where when God calls you to step into something, that you do things that don't come natural and are uncomfortable, but perhaps that's where God wants to grow you. So don't be afraid of that. But yes, there are people who have a leadership gifting more naturally than others, personality or gifting. What's important in that is that those type of people remember how important character is. Having a leadership personality doesn't mean you have biblical character. It just means you're good at doing things of a leader. And so we want to raise up those kind of people and let them work in their gifting. But those people have a responsibility to not rely on their personality alone, but make sure their character matches what the Bible says. Moni and then Hugh.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, most of the leaders that I have, in the world, yeah, most of the leaders that I have really admired and also look up to, they're not the natural leaders. They are the ones who learn. Yeah, so those are my, yeah, I don't know, it's just that, yeah, that I admired them more. I admired more their leadership.
Hugh.
Yeah, we'll get you one.
Sorry?
If you don't mind, you can-
Yeah, most of the leaders that I have, I admire or look up to, they are not the ones that natural leaders, yeah, but they are the ones who have learned, like he said.
So they don't necessarily have the personality of a
Yes.
leader.
Yes.
Maybe they're not charismatic in their communication or inspiring, or maybe they're not comfortable up front, but they've learned how to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
They grow.
Yeah.
And they learn.
Yeah. Some people clearly have leadership personalities and giftings. Just our daughter Tiffany, from the time she was 2, just how she is wired, how her personality and how she works. I have said to her, and I've said to people, she's going to leave her mark on the world. Just the question for us as parents, as we've worked with her, and for her as she becomes an adult, is what kind of mark is she going to leave? But she has that personality. So, and some people have that, and some people don't. But personality is not the requirement for biblical leadership. If you have it, that's an advantage, but it's not a requirement. You?
Yeah, well, I wanted to comment on that. Awesome. It's just we read Romans 12 today, and it talked about how gifts of grace is given among us, and that we're each a member of the body of Christ, and each member has its own functions, right? So of course and it says right here, it says like, you know, in Romans 12:6, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If it's prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If it's service, in our serving. One who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who's generous, or the one who acts in mercy. See, like those kind of thing is what I got from that, is that there's people who like Dave said have leadership qualities, or I wouldn't even say leadership qualities, but more I would say things that are seen as charismatic and being able to what we would deem as influential, like influential qualities, like, you know, being outspoken or being being able to communicate well. Of course, that's like a value, not a value, but that's like a skill that we see. But behind all of that, I think it's like what really functions is like, I think of like the physical body, you know, like let's say your left arm is really strong. You can't do anything by itself, you know. Let's say your brain is the function of everything in your body, but it can't live without a body, you know. It is that kind of understanding. And if you want a more practical example, is that I work in camp ministry, you know, so working with teens and youth in a summer camp, right? And there's of course people who have leadership qualities or who are at the top with the roles and positions, but it doesn't work anything because you need people who clean the toilets, you need people who cook, you need people who cook meals, you need people who keep the grass, you know, the grass cut. That's like what I mean by that. It's just, it's not a single thing, you know, like we just might be people who are more class qualities that are up, like we see as leaders, but like I think it really ties it well that everyone's a leader and everyone can contribute to something. And that's how success is made. It's not based on one person.
And again, we think the world has taught us that the camp counselor, the guy or the girl who is up front, is more important than the person who is cleaning the toilets or who is cooking the food. Right? We all think that. Is that biblical? Who is more important?
Equally important.
We're equally important. We all have the same value. We bear the image of God. And so whether we are speaking before 10,000 or cleaning up the toilets that 10,000 people have used, we all have the same value before God. This is something we need to have our mind transformed literally on a daily basis. Probably from the day we're born till the day we die, because there is just something out there that tells us those who are up front are more valuable than those who are behind. And it's not scriptural. And maybe the church models it poorly as well. And so we somehow then think pastors are more important than the church janitor. But it's actually not scriptural. So we need to work to resist that and to give value, the same value you give to me as the speaker up front today, you should give to Hannah or to Björn, who is cooking or cleaning today, because we're all equal. My role as a base leader doesn't make me more valuable than Björn Jetter, who cooks and runs the kitchen. I'm no more valuable than him. I'm no less valuable than him.
Yeah.
We're all equal. Yes.
Just to say that there was we always have this student introduction morning when we all eat weekly for the first time. And for Björn, I would say everybody went around and introduced themselves, and when Björn's turn came, he just everybody was clapping. He did not even say a word, and everybody went. Why? Because we appreciate, we recognize, and that's how it's like a teamwork even for a base.
If Hannah was not here, the base would fall apart.
Yes.
She would be greatly missed. Yeah, that's an exaggeration. It's an exaggeration meant to make a point. If I'm not here, same perspective. Over time, that there would be challenges. But the up front or behind or title or no title, we all carry the same value, and we all are leaders. Yes, some people can do the upfront thing easier than others, but that's a grace that God has given them. But it also comes with the temptation to rely on that rather than on character. And
yeah, what you were saying about that you are sometimes or often really challenged if you have to lead something.
Yeah.
And I think for you, this is a challenge. It's out of your comfort zone, and you have been trained in it to do it well.
Yeah.
And I think for the opposite, for people to whom leadership comes more natural, they are very much outspoken and just naturally lead and take the front position. For them, it might be also challenging to do the opposite, like to step back and let someone else lead, to whom it maybe comes less natural.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that, it's for both. We need to step into that challenging position. Okay, now I let someone else up front and I step back.
Yeah.
That's
true. For the ones that up front is their gifting and their personality, it is hard to sit on your hands and not step out and allow others to lead. Yeah. So each of us have our challenges.
When you said that there are people who are natural leaders.
Yeah.
Natural leaders in the sense that they like to be in the front. They want to speak out and express their. Is there a possibility that they lack a concept of leading and just taking a lead, or taking a lead? Or it's just a character that we consider that as a leader. As they can speak, they can express, they can be, they love to be in the front.
Yeah.
But is there a possibility that they lack in the area of a leading?
They might not see themselves as
as we see them, they just see themselves as normal and natural. So we would say, oh, that person, they're just a natural leader. And that person might just, no, I'm just Tommy. This is just who I am. And so because of that, because they don't recognize, maybe they're just natural, they don't recognize this leadership, this natural leadership they have, or this personality towards leadership they have, they might not be as intentional in their leadership as someone who doesn't have that gifting but has to lead. So with the example I gave about preparing meetings and leading those, I'm very intentional about that because I'm aware I lack that. I know other people who do the same thing who have this leadership gift, and they just go in and talk and like they're not as aware of it. And that's not a judgment statement, that's just an observation. So yeah, I think it's important whether we are natural leaders or whether we are leaders who are leading just because that's what God has asked us to do in whatever area. We should always be intentional about our leadership. We shouldn't just rely only on, in English we say, flying by the seat of our pants, just kind of relying on our personality to make it happen, relying on our charisma to make it happen. We should always be intentional. And intentionality in leadership really comes back to trusting God and relying on Him. Whether that's easy to do because we so know we can't lead on our own, or whether that's hard to do because we know, well, we actually probably could lead on our own. But it's being intentional to rely on Jesus. George.
Also, just to add what Sandra is, I believe a leader should be influenced the same way that you have said, and that is what matters. Like the leader you are. It's not just the one who comes in front and do all things and you see him in front, but if you can influence something based on how you believe on how God helps you to do it, I believe that's the best way that defines how you can do leadership. Like Esther did. She was not a leader, but she stepped in, and there was an impact of her influence and saved the country or the nation. So I was just reading some article about most of the difficult jobs, and one of them was these people, the person who was the last advice to the president of the United States. He needs to make a decision, and one person was saying that is one of the worst jobs that he can do it, but he has no choice, he has to do it. And we never see these guys, but he said that one of the worst moments was when they were making a decision to kill Osama, and they want to make this thing live, and the president is there, and some disagree, some agree, and he has the last option to the president. Can I do it or we don't do it? So, I can define like you must have some good qualities and you are good enough for you to do that. We may see the president coming out to say, we as the United States, we have done this and this and we have managed this, but there is a person behind that who is very influential and who took a very crucial decision for something to happen. So I take it like you can be in the position you are as long as you do it the best way you can do it possibly, and God helps you. That's my take.
Yeah. Good. Great questions. Good. Okay, let's move on. So I want to look a bit at different leadership styles that we see in Scripture. That of a shepherd, that of a servant. There are pictures of team leadership. So a lot of these overlap. They're not like their own separate categories by themselves. And I want to emphasize again, they come from Scripture. And so our tendency, or at least my tendency, is to sometimes think, oh, these leadership styles are related to the sphere of the church.
but not necessarily related to the sphere of business or to the sphere of education or to the sphere of government. I want to propose that these styles of leadership can be applied in every sphere. These are examples of leadership that God gives, styles of leadership, and they can be applied in different ways and in different spheres based on that. The application will look different, but the principle is there. So we're going to dive into some of these. There's scriptures by each of those. You can look those up, but we're going to look closely first at shepherding. What does that mean? What are some thoughts behind that? And then we'll spend more time on servant leadership. And I think the best example of a leader, if we look to someone and say, okay, what can I learn about leadership from what they did and who they are? I think the perfect example is Jesus Christ. And of course, that's obvious. We all know that. But we really sometimes forget that. We move away, even in Christianity, we move on to other people or even other ideas, but we forget that all that we need to know about leadership can be looked at through what we know of Jesus Christ. And again, the application of that is going to look different depending on what your calling and what your purpose is, what your project is that you're putting together. How it is applied will look different from one to the other. So, a shepherd. Some of the qualities of being of a shepherd that you want to incorporate in your life in the people you influence. In John chapter 10, verses 3 and 4, we see that a shepherd knows and cares for his sheep. So the key to that is relationship. Relationship is important because you will better be able to care for people that you know well. If you don't know anything about them, if you don't know who they are or what their needs are, your care for them may not hit home as much as it should. So as the business person who has a team of people working in his business underneath him, he should value relationship and getting to know them because they're not just there to make him money. They are there as people, as humans who have value. And so the more he gets to know them and cares for them and is aware of their concerns, is aware of their needs, the more he focuses on that, the better workers they will be. So relationship is key. The more we know, the more we're able to care in a good way. The second point is a shepherd, a leader who carries this heart of a shepherd will lay down his life for his sheep. Those who are responsible for him, who he is responsible for, he will sacrifice, she will sacrifice for them. And this is not, sometimes we say, well, that person has a shepherd's heart. And some people might be wired that way more. But we're all called in our leadership, in the way we influence people, we are all called to be shepherds, to lay down our lives for others, to prefer others over ourselves. Following Christ, bringing influence and leadership is about laying down your ambitions, your vision, your calling in order to serve others, in order to push them forward. And you can do that as a leader of a government, of a nation.
just as much as you can do that as a pastor of a church. The application will look different, but we're called to self-sacrifice, to push others forward, to be willing to set aside what we want for the betterment of others. It's Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Read those two verses in light of being a leader, in light of being someone who influences. Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. And don't just read it with the eyes of a person, but read it from the eyes, I'm a leader who influences. And I might also be a leader who has a certain role or responsibility. But in that leadership, this is what Paul says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress those you're leading. Be humble. Think of those you lead as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests as the leader, but take an interest in others as well. So walking with the Lord walking with Jesus is about looking out for others. And that's a trait that we want to bring into our leadership. And the third one, he unites his flock. Jesus united his flock under his leadership. And as people who influence, as people who, if we do have areas of responsibility, part of our job is to bring people together. And there are 8 billion people in the world around currently. That's what they say. I don't know how they count that, but we'll go with that. Each one of them is unique and different. Some have similarities, but everyone is unique and different. And part of the role of a leader is to bring a sense of unity, of purpose, a sense of oneness within a group of people who are just different. And this is something that that we have to work at. This is not easy. I was in a meeting 2 days ago with our DTS team here on base. We were 13 people. We were male and female. We were from the baby boomer generation. We were from the Gen X generation. We had millennials in the room, and we had Gen Z in the room. And we were from 8 different nations. And we had to make an important decision. So leadership is about taking the diversity of people we're in and working towards a unified purpose, a unified calling, coming to bring a unity for a decision. So that takes listening to one another. That takes the leader making sure everyone has an opportunity to speak and have their voice heard. That takes a leader who is willing to ask good questions. A leader who, again, whether it's a YWAM base or whether you're leading in another sphere, taking time to pray about the decision among people who are making it, who are a bit diverse in their background, listening to the Lord. But part of the role of being a leader is about bringing unity in decisions and bringing unity in purpose with people who are different. We often, like I said, we want to be people as we work to transform areas of society that we remember those are not just areas of society, because that's often what we think, oh, it's the area of education or it's the area of government. Yes, but those are actually people there. And so leadership is about working with people in whatever area you find yourself in. But you can't transform the area of government in a particular nation without working with people, without helping bring transformation into people. All right, so now we're going to look at servant leadership. And we're going to use Jesus as our example of servant leadership. And we'll go through each of these. So the first point, leading involves sacrifice and responsibility. Isaiah 53 is in the Old Testament. It is a prophecy of the sacrifices that Jesus would 700 years later that he would make in laying down his life. There is a lot there to be learned, but leading involves sacrifice and responsibility. It's about putting those you lead as your highest priority. Sometimes sacrifice and responsibility is about doing what needs to be done when no one else is doing it. You know, there are times in a staff afternoon where we ask for volunteers to do something. Hey, we need someone to do so-and-so on Monday. Could I get a volunteer to do that? And sometimes, I'll let you in on a secret, sometimes we don't get any volunteers. I know that's rare, that probably never happens to any other people, but sometimes there are just no volunteers. And so you know what? Guess who does it? The leader. So sometimes as a leader, you do what needs to be done to make sure your responsibilities are fulfilled. Sometimes no one else is able to do it. Sometimes we don't get volunteers because of very good reasons. But the thing still needs to be done. So a leader is willing to do what needs to be done. Another way of sacrifice and responsibility in a very practical way that a leader, I think a leader can exhibit, is the leader should be the first one there and sometimes the last one to leave. The leader sets the example. So if you come in a room and you're leading something at a particular point, let's say you're leading a meeting of teachers at your university, if that meeting starts at a particular time, it looks really good if when people come in, the leader is already sitting down ready to go. It looks really bad if everyone is sitting down waiting and the leader shuffles in 5 minutes late. So we want to be, as leaders, we want to be and we see this played out a lot in athletics. The leaders on a team are usually the first ones there for practice, and they stay the longest. And that is a quality of a leader that has, I think, tremendous value, no matter what area you're leading in. But it's a sacrifice. You know, because the others, again, I use some of my practical example. Other people who aren't leading a meeting can show up like right on time, right as the meeting starts. But the one leading the meeting, they have to show up early. They have to plan ahead of time. They have to make sure the chairs are out. They have to make sure the different machines are on. And so they lose their time. They sacrifice their time. But that's the responsibility of leadership, and so we should not just do that because we have to, but we should embrace it. Being the first one there as a leader sets a really good example for what we want from those that we're responsible for. And sometimes it does require being the last one to leave at the end of the day or at the end of the night. Another thing regarding sacrifice and responsibility is a good leader
will take ownership of his mistakes or her mistakes. They're willing to own those. They're willing to carry those. They're willing to be responsible for those, make those right when they can. And they also are willing to own the mistakes of other people. And I think Jesus is a great example of someone who owned the mistakes of other people. We see in Isaiah 53:6 again. This is that chapter in Isaiah about the suffering servant who would be Jesus Christ. I want you to try to follow this verse with logic in mind. So A leads to B, leads to C. And this is what it says. It says, all of us, like sheep, have gone astray. We have left God's paths. We have followed our own path. So these are the things that we have done. So if you follow logic, who should take responsibility for those actions? We did. We should. I strayed away from God. I left God's path. I followed my own way. So logic would tell us that I should bear that responsibility. But what does the verse tell us? I followed my own way. I left God's path. I did my own thing. But Jesus took responsibility for my actions. Sometimes we are called to, if we're going to model Jesus-style leadership, sometimes we need to take ownership for the things that other people have done. Could be previous leaders, it could be people in our midst. We have to own that because we're the leaders and we want to lead like Christ. So you know what? I'm taking ownership. I'm taking responsibility. It doesn't mean that the person maybe gets away scot-free, but we need to have this attitude that I'm going to take responsibility for mistakes. And sometimes that means, sometimes I have people who are under my leadership who say or do something wrong on my behalf. I don't say, well, that's not me, that person did it. I say, you know what, we as leaders communicated poorly. Would you forgive me? Because I'm ultimately responsible for the failure we have made, for the miscommunication we have done. So I'm not saying people are not responsible for their individual decisions and choices. That's not what I'm saying. But I think a good leader will be willing to take responsibility to cover for those he leads. And I just say that because Jesus has done that for me. He took responsibility for what I did, for the mistakes I made, for the sins I committed. And he said, you know what, I'm going to own that.
Can you give an example on how you bring that together?
Yeah.
You cover for the people, but still they have to take responsibility.
Yeah. So, and I can use a Bible example, but it's a real day. I think it can be applied to all of us in real day. Someone steals some money from a family they own, or they steal money from an employer. Okay, and then they take off, they run away, and somehow they connect with you and you become their leader. You can do one or two things. You could say, okay, well, you have a responsibility to go back and pay that back and make that right. Or you could say, you could reach out to that person and say, hey, if they've taken anything from you, I will cover that. I will pay for that. And that's what Paul told Philemon in the New Testament. Philemon was a slave who stole money from his employer, from his master, and then he ran away and he found Paul. And then Paul writes this letter to the owner of the slave. Onesimus was the slave, Philemon was the owner. And Paul writes the letter and he says, hey, Philemon, I'm sending Onesimus back to you. And if he has taken anything from you, charge it to my account. I'll pay for it. That's discipleship, where the rubber meets the road. There is a time and there is a place where we as leaders, where we say, you know what, Onesimus, I think you need to pay that debt. But that's not the only option. The option very clearly is sometimes we as leaders can pay people, we can cover their errors and their ways. And again, I think it comes back to this model of leadership that Jesus as a servant presents to us. And that's hard, that's difficult. We as, that's not easy to be willing to cover someone's, in this case, their financial debt. But there's nothing in Scripture that says we can't do that. And some of our thinking is, yeah, but they're not going to learn their lesson. Maybe they're going to do it again. They need to pay their debt back so they learn. They need to be responsible. Yes, I agree. But that's not the only answer sometimes. I think Paul gives us a very clear example. As leaders, sometimes be willing to own the mistakes of someone else, even when it's not yours.
I think it also comes with this because as a leader we get all the praise and anything that has good done by the team. So in that sense, if we, for example, have a contract or something to make this garden nice, and if by mistake one of us from our team chopped the wrong tree, and the owner comes and says, hey, this is your team has done that, as me being the leader of this garden team, I would not say I take Ezra and crucify him. I would say, hey, I am sorry. That was the example. So I would not hand over my team person and put the blame, but I would say, I'm sorry, how can we fix this? So as being a leader, I take that blame and go through that shame for my team, but that does not mean that I don't come back to him and try to tell him, hey, that wasn't nice. You need to listen to the instructions, but for that time, as being a leader, I need to take that shame and take responsibility for my team. So that's what he was trying to.
It doesn't excuse the behavior, and it doesn't mean there's not another discipleship process. But this is where servant leadership, this is where the rubber meets the road. We want to be like Jesus. This is what we need to be willing to sacrifice, take responsibility. We need to be willing to own other people's mistakes. Because again, Jesus did
and
it
hurts,
for us.
In reality, you have to say, hey, that's not me.
Yeah. My flesh cries out. I didn't cut the tree.
Yeah.
It was Ezra. Or I didn't steal the money. Yeah. It was Onesimus. That is a natural feeling. But we're not, when we follow Christ, we're not natural. We're supernatural. And supernatural is, you know what? If Onesimus stole from you, I'll take the money out of my bank account and I'll pay you back. That's servant leadership. Servant leaders serve and empower others, not just command or tell others what to do. So we want to give opportunities to people. We want to, good servant leaders, release people to do things without micromanaging them. So, again, this is a challenge. But we want to, if I give Joshua the responsibility to do something, if I release him to do that, you know what that means? I should also be willing to let Joshua do it the way that works best for him. Rather than saying, Joshua, I want you to do this, but you have to do it this way, this way, this way, this way. I just micromanage that. That's not servant leadership. Servant leadership releases people and allows them to do it the way that works for them. Here's where the challenge is. The result of what they do could look different than the result I do or I desire. Yes.
When you said leaders delegate, I mean,
Yeah.
you work and then they don't do the micromanaging.
Right.
I'm not for the micromanaging or against it, but I just want to clarify it.
Yeah.
Why not leader take responsibility or give them a guidance, because they have a bigger picture of what's happening around,
Yeah.
or everything that's coming up,
Yeah.
what is being expected.
Yeah.
What's wrong if a leader micromanages it?
Well, I don't think it's micromanaging if you are walking with them. If you are stepping aside and walking with them. But let them, I think sometimes we ask people to do something, but we want them to do it the way that comes natural to us. And that's just not fair, because Joshua is not me. So I'll take a very practical example. Joshua, I want you to, and I hope I don't step on toes here, but Joshua, I want you to clean the bathroom every Tuesday. He should be free to clean that bathroom as best as he can. And then he and I can have some dialogue and talk about it. Hey, you did really well here. This could be an area of improvement. But releasing people, not leaving them. I'm not for like saying, hey, okay, Joshua, just go. I'm giving you this responsibility. Just run with it, and I'm going to go do my own thing. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that I don't know how to describe it better other than to say sometimes we ask people to do things the way we want them to do it. And that's really difficult for them because they have a different personality. They have a different experience, a different way of doing things that they've grown up with. And we put an extra burden on them because we expect them to do it the way we would. And we want to...
In a way, it's a giving freedom.
Yeah.
When the work is being assigned,
Yeah.
or a task is being assigned to them.
Yeah.
Giving them complete freedom in choosing,
Yeah.
However they want to execute that.
Yeah. And walking in relationship with them. And I think that's the key. If we walk in relationship with people, there's a dialogue. They will understand our perspective and some of what we're after, and we will understand some of their giftings and how they might do it a little better or a little different than us, and we can be comfortable with that. And it's knowing when you need to do that type of releasing and when you need to write a paper for a school and there are just things that need to be there. You need to have double spaced. It needs to be 12-point font. It needs to be New Times Roman. Those are things that are not negotiable. So you can't just say, okay, you're free to write your paper and you can do it whatever way you want and however. That's not what I'm saying. But it's about releasing people. And sometimes releasing people means I'm going to give up my right to have them do it a certain way. And I'm going to allow them to do it their way, achieving the same outcome, but just doing it in a way that works for them. George.
I think I have a different opinion towards most is related to it. You can release them, in my perspective, but at the same time, you should be in a position to own their mistakes out of what you have given them to do if they don't do it well. Because just for example, the time that we were going to learn and the things that we prepared for the church, and he was chosen to make a sermon in church, and Marcos was saying like
you say that 30 minutes, I'll do it 30 minutes, and Marcos was 30 minutes? So something like that's too long. Because Marcos knows that let's know the people, at the same time he's a leader, part of the school. So the things that you can tell to the people is out of control on how it's going, because it is who's speaking there. So at the same time, the image of the school and how that impact it can bring. So maybe Marcos should worry sometimes, like he needs to go with the time. These people don't want to preach it, there's their culture, something like this. At the same time, he wants to give you the freedom to do his own thing the best possible. So I think sometimes also it comes with some risk, because you are not in control of something that person is going to do. So you have to give some direction, give him some freedom, but at the same time take ownership in case of it goes wrong. Yeah, so that's why the balance.
We want to give as much freedom as possible and allow for as little form or guidance or boundary as is needed. But that is needed. It needs both.
Yeah, but isn't that also like when you're a leader and you delegate like a task to someone, or you give someone a task? It also involves like training. Like I know what Hannah does. When a new school arrives, she trains the young people and she shows how to clean the bathroom, how she wants it done, and then she releases them.
Yeah.
So there's also a training process that they know, okay, this is what I expect, this is what needs to be done, this is how I would like to do it, it needs to be this standard.
Yeah. Yeah, and so
then-
train them
so
and then
it's-
release them to do
it's
it,
both.
recognizing they could do everything that the training says, and it could be a little less cleaner than what I want it to be. Am I okay with that? Or does that stress me out and bother me? So yeah, I think we're for training. But I think we just need to give freedom and the form where it's needed, but be okay with when the outcome is accomplished, but maybe looking a little different than what I would do. Because, I'm not picking on Hannah, you brought it up, but Hannah has been cleaning and doing stuff on the base for 30 some years. And you have someone who comes in as a 19-year-old who maybe has never cleaned a bathroom in their life.
Exactly, yeah.
And you can argue, well, that's not good and all of that, but that's the reality. So we give them a little training and we release them to do the job.
Yeah.
And if they say, hey, I did everything I was asked to do, then we're okay with that, because it's not about the clean bathroom. That's not the goal. The goal is to love the person who is cleaning the bathroom.
Isn't it a little bit both? Like,
Yeah,
you
I
want
would
the
say.
bathroom also to be clean at the
Yes,
end of the
but
day,
why
right?
do we want clean bathrooms?
Yeah.
Not so they can be clean. We want clean bathrooms because we love one another.
Yeah, okay.
And that's a way to
So
serve
it is both.
cleaning properly, you serve other people who
Right.
are using.
Yes.
So that's something for on a person who is cleaning.
Yeah.
That he love other by cleaning toilet properly. He love other to be this neat and clean bathroom.
But let's not, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but let's not make our standard of a clean bathroom the biblical standard.
Yeah.
There are other standards of cleaning a bathroom that are fine and good.
Yeah.
So, good leadership. We want to serve, we want to empower, we want to release. We want to give freedom as much as we're able to. We want to maintain as much form as is needed. The form shouldn't crush the freedom. The form should help the freedom accomplish the purpose. True biblical leadership, point 3, involves a willingness to do the dirty work. In my years of walking with the Lord in my years of YWAM, the more I live life each year, the more I see this is a big part of leadership. It's really about being willing to do the dirty work. You probably don't read that in books a whole lot, but that's just the reality of biblical leadership. You know, when I was first on staff, after my DTS, I was on staff in St. Croix, and I had the responsibility to take the base trash, put it in the truck, and drive it to the dump and get rid of the trash. At that time, we didn't have trash trucks come pick it up. We brought the trash. And so people in their homes on base and in the base offices, they would bring the trash to the trash can. And if they were nice, they would put the lid on the trash can. And then every Thursday, it was my job to come with the truck to put the trash cans in the truck and to do that. So I did that for 3 years. Every Thursday, more than once, I would come out on a Thursday morning to do the trash. And for whatever reason, I don't know if the lid wasn't put on the trash can or if an animal got into it, it didn't matter what it was. But there would be trash all over the yard. So there would be leftover food that had some maggots in it. There would be, honest, I'm telling the truth, there would be young kids' dirty diapers on the yard. There would be feminine hygiene products that had been used spread on the yard because the trash was spilled. So I learned to do the dirty work. I learned to pick all of that up and put it in a new trash bag and put it in a can and go to the dump and dump the trash. There were some times where I knew which child's dirty diaper that was because there was only one kid in diapers on the base at the time. So I easily could have gone to the parents and said, hey, can you pick up your kid's diaper for me? But that wasn't my job as the trash man, was to do that dirty work. And I can tell you what, as I've grown and as I've nurtured and developed, there have been opportunities for me to step into different types of leadership. School leading, school staffing, base leadership. There are times where I would long to go back to picking up those dirty diapers. Mm-hmm. Because leadership, when you're dealing with people, is dirty work sometimes. You have to do the challenging things. You have to have hard conversations with people. You have to be willing to step in and say, hey, you know what? We need to have a difficult conversation. Nobody likes those. Those aren't fun, but that's a part of leadership. If you're running a business and someone steals money from your business, you're going to have a hard conversation with them. There's a couple ways to do that. You could just fire them. That would be one way and within your rights. You could also have a conversation and say, hey, you know, I'm aware that you took this money. Could you explain to me why you took it? And then they might say, well, you know, I just wanted to have a good time on the weekend and there was money and I took it. Or they could have a good reason for taking the money. Proverbs tells us, you know, a thief who steals because he's hungry, yes, he's responsible for his stealing, but you don't have to be as hard on him as the thief who steals because he wants to use it on his good pleasure. So you have to have hard conversations. You need to be willing to speak the truth in love sometimes. You need to be willing sometimes to say the hard thing. You need to, as a leader, you need to be willing to invite people who are in conflict with one another to work to resolve that conflict. That's dirty work, especially when there are times where both parties would acknowledge there's a conflict,
but they have decided that I would rather not resolve the conflict. I would rather just walk around that person than walk with that person. And so the leader has to do the dirty work. The leader sometimes needs to embrace being misunderstood. There are times where, as leaders, we communicate things and people misunderstand our actions or they misunderstand our intentions. We have to embrace that. A biblical leader, no matter where he sees himself leading, a biblical leader doesn't always need to defend themselves. Sometimes we just let people draw their accusations, let people draw their opinions about us, but don't defend yourself. We see that in Jesus. People drew all sorts of opinions about Jesus. And even some of the government leaders at that time, when he was being arrested, accused him of certain things. The religious leaders, they accused him of quite a few things. And what did Jesus say? Jesus remained silent. So that's the dirty work. Sometimes you just need to say what the decision you want to make or the area you're leading, you say that. And you don't need to defend yourself. You can, in quiet humility, just remain silent. You also don't need to be, and this is a weak point for me, and something that I feel like I've grown in the past 5 years, but I also feel like I haven't arrived. I still need to grow, to not become defensive. When someone gives an opinion or a critique, good leaders do not become defensive. You know, I remember back to my DTS, there's only 2 or 3 things I remember that I learned in DTS, just because it was so long ago. But one of the things was, we were talking about, the speaker was talking about how to confront people, how to have conversations in a good way, and so on and so forth. And he made the point that when someone comes to you and says something, a critique or an opinion, or they speak the truth to you, but they do it in an unhealthy way, we still have a responsibility to look past the way they said it and look at what they said and see, is there truth in what they're saying? Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, servant leadership. That's not always easy. It's very easy when someone comes to you and they explode all over you and yell at you and scream at you and curse you, to just say, well, I'm going to ignore everything they've said because look at the way they said it. Mm-hmm. We have a responsibility as leaders to not dismiss what they say. We may need to dismiss how they say it, but we need to look at what they say. And it's being being willing to do the dirty work. I had this teacher in my DTS, and this is what he said: if you want to be a servant, don't be surprised when you get treated like one. If you want to be a servant, don't be surprised when people treat you like one. Now, I'm not saying that we have the right to treat servants like servants. We need to be honorable and respectful. But if you're willing to be a servant, if you're desiring to be a servant, be aware that people are going to treat you bad sometimes. And don't be surprised about that. Servants have no rights. And that's the model of leadership that Jesus gives. So an example of this being treated less than nice, Jesus tells a story in Luke 17. Okay, so you put yourself in this story.
You are working all day out in the field. It is hot, it is humid, you're sweating like crazy. It's so hot and so dry that the ground is hard to dig up. The ground is not fresh and wet, and so it comes up easily. It's really difficult. It's super, super dry. And you've been working all day plowing that field. You've also been working taking care of sheep. And these sheep are stupid. They don't follow you. They don't listen to you. They have bugs in their eyes that you have to clean off. So between working in the field all day and sweating like crazy and having blisters on your hands, you're also dealing with these animals who smell. And at the end of the day, you come home and what do you want to do? You just want to relax. You just want to rest. You want a cup of cold water. But if you're the servant, what is your responsibility? To come in to your master's house and to cook him a meal, to serve him first, even though you're dead tired and you're wore out. Make sure his needs are taken care of. And be okay with the fact that he doesn't thank you because you worked so hard today. Because you're a servant. It almost doesn't seem fair, does it? It almost doesn't seem fair. And yet this is the picture that Jesus paints of what leadership is. Being willing to be the servant. Yes, people should treat us well, and they should be honorable and respectful to us, but I can't force that on people. And they're going to be responsible before God. But my role as a servant is to do the role of a servant, which sometimes is tiring and hard and difficult and goes unnoticed and without attention. And when I'm tired and feel like I'm at the end, I give more because I'm a servant leader. A servant, in the day that Jesus is talking of, servants, they had very little rights. And so as leaders, we need to give up our rights as well. Our right to comfort, our right to, I try to put things in today's perspective. We need to give up our right. I've had to realize that sometimes as a leader, I need to give up my right to have the weekend off. Because something comes up that a leader needs to deal with, and it doesn't come up Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. It comes up Friday night at 11 o'clock. But it can't wait till Monday to be dealt with. So I have to deal with it. So you have to, I'm not saying you work yourself to death all weekend, but there are times where leaders need to give up their rights to something like a free weekend. We need to be willing to serve. And we shouldn't be surprised if we're sometimes treated not so nicely, because we are, after all, servants. And that's how Jesus lived. Sometimes I think you could say he was not treated nicely. So servant leadership, I think, is the example of what it means to be a biblical leader. And yeah, so a book I recommend is entitled The Leadership Paradox, A Challenge to Servant Leadership in a Power-Hungry World by Denny Gunderson. So it is available on Amazon, it is available on Kindle, and I think there are some really good timeless truths in there about what servant leadership looks like. And we live in a world where this is not the picture of what it means to be a leader. It's not the picture the world gives us, that this is the type of leadership we should aspire to. And this is the type of leadership we should live out. And yet it's clear through Scripture, and especially through the life of Jesus, that that this was his perspective on leadership. So he said very few things about leadership, but two of the things he said very clearly. One is in Matthew 20, verses 20 through 28. His disciples are arguing about certain things, and Jesus said, you know, the rulers that you have, they lord their rulership over you. But among you, it should be different. Whoever wants to be a leader must be a servant. Whoever wants to be first among you should be a slave. For even the Son of Man, even Jesus, even himself, even myself, Jesus says, I came not to be served, but I came to serve. And he makes that same statement in Mark chapter 10, verses 35 and 45. So we're going to look at, as we close, we're going to look at very briefly, what is that word? When Jesus uses that word servant, what did he mean by that? And to do that, I want to paint a scenario for us from this book, and then we'll listen to an audio reading of a story from this book. Okay, so this is the setting. You are in the Sahara Desert. You and your wife, or you and your husband, are going through the Sahara Desert with your caravan of goods and your family and extended, maybe your servants, the people who are your servants. You're going through the desert, and one of your servants is named Jehaziel. Jehaziel is with you on this trip. And during this trip in the desert, a sandstorm starts. You have that picture? Okay. On their cheeks as vision strained to return. They seem to have been partially shielded to the east by an outcropping of rock. We made it, the man cried, looking at his wife, who returned his gaze, then glanced inadvertently over her husband's shoulder. An anguished expression came over the woman's face. Turning, the husband followed his wife's line out of sight. Oh no, he cried. Lying half buried in the sand was the familiar figure of their loyal servant Jehaziel, his body frozen in the stiff posture of death. The master and his wife slumped to their knees in silent memorial. It was now apparent that their beloved servant Jehaziel had confronted the dust storm head on. In so doing, he shielded his master and his wife. He selflessly gave up his own life to save the lives of those he was responsible for. His sacrifice was rewarded by the humiliation of an inglorious death. So here's this story of a servant who, in the midst of a storm, stands in front of the storm to protect his master and his master's wife, giving up his life in the process. And this preceding scenario, the book goes on to say, depicts the origin of the Greek word servant used by Jesus when he told his disciples, whoever wants to become great from you must be your servant. The Greek word used here for servant is diakonos. Diakonos consists of two words, dia meaning through or across, and akonos translated as dust, dirt, or earth. Thus, diakonos literally means through the dust. The words minister and deacon and leader in the Bible, some translations use leader, they come from this same root word. In our story,
that we just listened to, the servant fought his way through the dust to sustain the lives of people other than himself. How startling that Jesus used that word, diakonos, to respond to a request about leadership. That was the word Jesus chose to use. He could have said anything he wanted to say when his disciples talked with him about leadership, and he used the word servant. On numerous occasions, the disciples of Jesus argued among themselves regarding leadership. Their disputes were attended by unrighteous self-interest. The desire for power and position was always the unspoken backdrop for their remarks. Yet usually Jesus refused to dignify their discussion with direct answers, preferring instead to demonstrate servanthood. In fact, Jesus had very little to say about leadership, and even less about how to be a leader. He let his life be his teaching. So when we look at leadership, when we look at biblical leadership, whatever sphere you find yourself in, wherever you are influencing, whether you have two people that you have relationship with, that you bring influence into their life, whether you have a role or a responsibility, if you want to model biblical leadership, you will be a servant. You will be someone like this servant in this story who is willing to stand in front of the storm, in front of the challenges, and take the brunt of that for other people. How that's applied, how that's lived out in different spheres will look differently. But in the same way that a church leader is called to servant leadership, so is a government leader. And so is a leader in the area of education, because that is biblical leadership, being servants. Yes?
Is this story from the book that you shared?
Yeah, the story is at the preface of the book. It introduces the book.
Yeah. Leadership paradox?
Yep.
Okay.
And so what I did is I took the text of the story yesterday and I found one of these AI things that allows you to make audio text and you like have free times. So that's what I did. I don't know why I didn't finish it, but I listened to it yesterday and it worked, so who knows. But yeah, so that story is in the book. It introduces the concept of servant leadership, and it lays that as the biblical foundation. But it is interesting, Jesus, the most influential man in the world, when he was asked about leadership, his picture of it was servant. It wasn't corporate CEO, it wasn't king, it wasn't ruler, it was servant. And that's what I hope that we can see, that we walk away from these 2 days together. I haven't spoken a lot on leadership strategies or leadership structures. What I've tried to do is I've tried to lay a foundation of what biblical leadership is, and trust that as you step into leadership, whether that's with your family or with your friends that you're already leading, or the teachers who come to you for input, or whether that's leadership that someone has given you a role or a position or a title, I trust that you will be able to take some of what we've learned as the foundation for biblical leadership, which is servanthood, and being about relationships, and be able to then implement that in your leadership. Thank you, everyone.